Chapter 2995. Heaven Accessing Place. You don't have to do that, Brother Ma. I can do it alone. I don't need anyone else's cooperation. Zhuan's voice was cold. He didn't intend to cooperate with Ma Yujie. After all, he had cooperated with Ma Yujie many times. Most of the time he was cheated. This time he didn't intend to be cheated by the fat man again. Ma Yujie wasn't surprised. He waved his sleeve and took out a crystal-clear jade talisman. He made a gesture with his right hand and activated the jade talisman. The lines on the surface of the jade talisman emitted a blazing brilliance, and then many rays of light shot out. These rays of light projected into the void of space, projecting one image after another. Zhuan glanced at the images and found that they were in a gear zone. In front of each image, there was a huge body that was faintly discernible. This body was extremely large. It rested at the very top, covering the sky and earth. The moment Zhuan saw the figure, he narrowed his eyes. He guessed that this body was probably the body of ancestor sorcerer Gonggong, whom he was looking for in the door of darkness. But Zhuan was puzzled. How could Ma Yujie have so many images of the gear zone from different angles and directions? It was as if this man had set up many surveillance formations in the gear zone. This gear zone is the only way to get to the body of ancestor sorcerer Gonggong. I have distributed hundreds of millions of talismans to every practitioner who enters this zone, and secretly set up a surveillance formation in each talisman. Even if I don't enter the gear zone, I can see which places are dangerous and which are safe. I can use the method of elimination to figure out the real path. Ma Yujie put away the jade talisman, and the images in the void disappeared. He looked at Zhuan complacently and said, "Brother Long, it's beneficial for you to cooperate with me. Don't you agree?" Zhuan narrowed his eyes and said indifferently, "Since you have designed everything, it seems that I can't interfere. It's unnecessary for you to cooperate with me." Zhuan had a feeling that this fat man must have seen how he tamed Gonggong's goobug, and had guessed that it was Gonggong's goobug. Perhaps this was the reason why this fat man suddenly proposed to cooperate with him. Ma Yujie grinned and said, "The thing you tamed just now should have something to do with Gonggong, right?" Zhuan's face suddenly turned cold. Just as he was about to refuse, Ma Yujie's voice sounded in his mind, "Brother Zhua, you don't have to be in such a hurry to refuse. That worm should be a Gonggong goo worm, right? Also, I saw that when you subdued that Gonggong goo worm, you also released 3 other worms. If I'm not wrong, those 3 worms should also be ancestral wizard goo worms. You've been collecting these things all these years. It should be related to your physical body, right? I think the Pangus sacred body is the only body strengthening method that requires the use of ancestor Magus goo worms." As soon as Ma Yujie said this, Zhuan's pupils shrank into needles. He turned his head and looked at Ma Yujie, who was smiling faintly in front of him in disbelief. Both the ancestral wizard goo worm and the Pangus sacred body were things from a long time ago. In this era, there were very few people who knew about the Pangus sacred body and the ancestral wizard goo worm. If Zhuan hadn't inherited the Pangus sacred body, he wouldn't have known about the Pangus sacred body and the ancestral wizard goo worm at all. However, the fat man in front of him said it so easily. Zhuan felt that it was inconceivable. "Who the hell are you?" Zhuan's face darkened, and he no longer hid the killing intent in his eyes. He stared coldly at Ma Yujie and asked. Ma Yujie had a faint smile on his face, but he didn't care about the killing intent in Zhuo Wen's eyes, nor did he answer Zhuo Wen's question directly. Instead, he said indifferently, "Brother Zhuo, I'm sure you've already guessed why I insist on cooperating with you. It's because you have the Pangus sacred body. You should be able to easily extract the essence blood of the ancestral wizard. And I happen to need this ability of yours. So, isn't it a win-win for us if we cooperate?" Zhuo slowly walked towards Ma Yujie and said with killing intent, "Why should I cooperate with you? As long as I kill you, it'll be fine. No matter what your background is, as long as you're dead, nothing can threaten me. As he spoke, Zhuowen kicked with his right foot. His whole body burst out with a crystal-clear light, and an aura like that of an ancient savage beast came crushing over. Bang! Zhuowen punched Ma Yujie's face. He didn't hold back at all this time. His punch seemed to break the sky and the earth. It was very terrifying. Ma Yujie narrowed his eyes, and a trace of coldness burst out. He also punched out, choosing to meet Zhuowen head-on. Rumble! When the two fists collided, the power that erupted was very terrifying. The whole ground cracked, and the void seemed to collapse. Thump! 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 Zhuowen hurriedly retreated. Soon after, he saw Ma Yujie standing in front of him, quietly standing on the spot. At this moment, Ma Yujie no longer had the appearance of the fat man at the beginning. Instead, he was full of majesty. In particular, his eyes were filled with starlight, bright and deep. He stared straight at Zhuowen. Brother Zhuo, I don't want to beat around the bush with you anymore. The essence blood of the ancestral wizard is very useful to me. If you cooperate with me, we will each get half of the essence blood. Ma Yujie's long hair moved without wind as he said lightly. Zhuowen stabilized his body and coughed out a mouthful of blood. He looked at Ma Yujie in front of him with great fear. At this moment, Ma Yujie gave him a very strange feeling. It was as if he was no longer facing the fat man in the past, but a complete stranger. I can cooperate with you, but you need to tell me who you are. Zhuowen took a deep breath. The injuries on his body were quickly healed under the effect of the Gomang goo. He stood up and looked calmly at the fat man in front of him. He knew that Ma Yujie only came to cooperate with him. It was impossible for Ma Yujie to kill him. Ma Yujie's identity had always been a mystery to Zhuowen. When he was in the 8 heavens, he thought Ma Yujie came from the Xianmi heavenly territory. Now that he had come to the Xianmi heavenly territory, he found that Ma Yujie's origin was far from as simple as he had thought. Ma Yujie fell silent. After a while he said lightly, "It is not good for you to know my origin. I don't think you need to know. I am very curious. I must know. If you don't tell me, our cooperation will be ruined." Zhuowen's tone was flat. Although he had fallen into a disadvantageous position in the exchange earlier, it was basically impossible for Ma Yujie to kill him completely. After all, he had quite a number of trump cards in his possession. When the time came, it was not certain who would be the one to kill who. Chapter 2996. Far Ancient, the Heaven-Accessing Place? What's that? Zhuowen asked in confusion. The so-called Heaven-Accessing Place is a micro-world. This micro-world is not ordinary. It was built by a group of powerful experts of the heaven-reaching realm. In the heaven-accessing place, experts of the human clan and the alien clan coexist, unlike the Xianmi heavenly domain and the untainted heavenly domain, who fight against each other all year round. Ma Yujie said calmly. Zhuowen looked surprised. This was the first time he had heard about the heaven-accessing place, especially the heaven-reaching master of the human clan and the alien clan that Ma Yujie had mentioned. Why did they coexist in that small world? Why did these experts of the heaven-reaching realm live in the heaven-accessing place instead of in their own heavenly domains? You're surprised that these experts of the heaven-reaching realm don't live in their own heavenly domains, right? To tell you the truth, the heaven-accessing place was co-founded by experts of the human tribe and the alien tribe. It's not so much a micro-world as an organization that only belongs to the experts of the heaven-reaching realm. Any practitioner of the human tribe or the alien tribe who reaches the level of the heaven-reaching realm will receive an invitation to join the heaven-accessing place. Of course, this organization is very free. It doesn't restrict the freedom of its members. There are many experts who hold high positions in their own heavenly domains. For example, Senki In, the master of the 10 Extremes In Corp sect, received an invitation not long ago after he became a heaven-reaching realm. Speaking of this, my Yuja deliberately paused for a while and continued, and I remember that the old man of the 3 pure ones who left the 8 heavens should have directly returned to the heaven-accessing place. This old guy is not simple. He should also know that you have the Pangu, sacred body. You'd better be careful. Zhuoyin fell silent. After a while he said, "So you're from the heaven-accessing place." Ma Yujia sneered with a trace of disdain in his eyes. He said calmly, "I'm from the primitive age, a place you can never reach. That's all I can tell you. Even if I tell you more, you won't know. I think the heaven-accessing place should be enough to exchange for a chance to cooperate with you." Zhuoyin took a deep look at Ma Yujia. He also saw the disdain and contempt in Ma Yujia's eyes. How could Ma Yujia show such disdain for the heaven-accessing place? Did he come from a place more mysterious than the heaven-accessing place? And the ancient times that Ma Yujia spoke of, what kind of place was that? "I agree to cooperate with you, but there is a condition. You must swear an oath to the heavenly Tao. I'm afraid you will cheat me when the time comes," Zhuoyin said in a deep voice. Ma Yujia was a little speechless. He immediately swore an oath to the heavenly Tao and said, "This time I'm sincerely cooperating with you and I won't cheat. You don't have to be so careful. I've been tricked by you." Zhuoyin glanced at Ma Yujia. After reaching an agreement with Ma Yujia, Zhuoyin went to the place where Gonggong's body was kept. But before they left, the dark creature also intended to follow them. Ma Yujia was very dissatisfied with this, thinking that the beast was a burden. After knowing that the dark creature's purpose was to leave this place, Ma Yujia transmitted a thought to the dark creature. The dark creature happily rushed in a certain direction, no longer paying attention to Zhuoyin. Zhuoyin was speechless as he watched the dark creature leave. He turned to Ma Yujia and said, "Brother Ma, what did you say to the dark creature?" "I just told the beast where the exit was. Didn't it want to go out? Tell it to get out by itself. There's no need for it to follow us and drag us down." Ma Yujia shrugged. Zhuoyin looked at Ma Yujia, speechless. They didn't know where the exit was. It was the door of darkness. But Zhuoyin doubted whether the dark creature could pass through the door of darkness. After all, there were restrictions on entry and exit. But Zhuoyin also knew that even if he left with the dark creature, they had to pass through the door of darkness. If the dark creature couldn't pass through the door of darkness, there was nothing he could do. Ma Yujia and Zhuoyin were very decisive in their actions. They immediately rushed to the place where Gonggong's body was kept. On the way, Zhuoyin looked at Ma Yujia and asked, "Brother Ma, aren't you afraid that someone will reach the place where Gonggong's body is and take it away before we do?" Ma Yujia said indifferently, "The body of the ancestral shaman is extremely terrifying. Even if he's dead, his body strength is comparable to that of an early-stage ascension master, unless someone has ascension-level artifact. In my opinion, only a few Tao Palace forces can have ascension-level artifact. The masters of those forces will temporarily hand over their ascension-level artifacts to the strongest geniuses who entered this time for safekeeping. That is to say, among this group of people, only top geniuses like the Saintess of the Phoenix people and Zhongli Haoyan can have such artifacts. And even if they use a ascension-level artifact, it will take a lot of effort to break open the body of the ancestral shaman. That is to say, even if they find the exit and reach there first, I'm afraid it will take a lot of effort to take the body." Zhuoyin frowned and said, "What if they directly put Gonggong's body into their small world? Then they will bring it back to the sect and slowly study it to extract the blood essence of the ancestral shaman." Ma Yujia sneered and said, "The ancestral shaman is not an ordinary thing. There are very few dimensions that can store such a powerful being like the ancestral shaman. At least, I haven't seen one before, unless it's a very high-grade ascension-level artifact. Do you think forces like the 10 Extremities Yin Corp sect and the Yin and Yang Divine sect will have such an artifact?" Zhuoyin fell silent. Ma Yujia was right. Among all the artifacts, Ascension-level artifacts were one of the rarest artifacts. The value of Ascension-level artifact was not something an ordinary Ascension-level artifact could compare to. According to Zhuowen's knowledge, Dao Palace forces like the Ten Extremities In-Corp sect only had one Ascension-level artifact, and that was the Yama's ghost portrait. Unfortunately, the Yama's ghost portrait was obtained by him. As for the other Dao Palace forces, they might not even have an Empyrean-level artifact. Even if they did, it would not be a very high-level artifact. As for Empyrean-level spatial artifacts, that was basically a joke. It was very unlikely that the average Dao Palace force would have one. I wonder if my great world can subdue Gong Gong. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. His great world had evolved from the Devourer King's inner world. Ever since his doppelganger cultivated the Pangu sacred body, his great world had been constantly evolving. It was also contaminated with the vast aura of the Pangu sacred body. Its grade was far higher than the small worlds of other cultivators. Chapter 2997. Heading to the gear, Zone Mayuja said to Zhuowen, "You're different. You cultivate the Pangu sacred body and can easily extract the ancestral witch's blood essence. So, you don't need to take Gong Gong's body with you. All you need to do is extract all of Gong Gong's blood essence." Soon, the two of them arrived at the vast open space. Above the open space was the boundless gear zone. At the very top of the colorful gear, an incomparably huge body stretched across the void, blocking out the sun and the sky. Zhuowen glanced at the huge body and knew that it should be the body of ancestral witch Gong Gong. "Come on, let's go in. I've thoroughly analyzed the images just now and have a rough understanding of the gear zone. We'll take fewer detours than others when we enter the gear zone." Ma Yujie took out the jade talisman and looked at the images for a while, then put it away and said to Zhuowen. However, Zhuowen stopped Ma Yujie. Looking at the latter's puzzled eyes, Zhuowen said, "My two friends should have been given the 100 million miles talisman by you, right?" Ma Yujie laughed dryly and nodded without saying anything. Zhuowen's eyes were calm as he said coldly, "And the 100 million miles talisman you gave us is probably a fake." It was not the first time he had dealt with Ma Yujie, so he knew what kind of character the fat man had. The 100 million miles talisman was a very precious escape talisman. Even for Dao Palace forces, it was quite precious. The fat man had given away so many of them in one go, which was a great loss. He had long suspected that the escape talismans given by the fat man were fake. After all, if they were real, the cost would be too high. Hee, Brother Zhua, you know that the 100 million miles talisman is very precious. If I used the real one, wouldn't I lose a lot? So, Ma Yujie was very thick-skinned and did not feel embarrassed. So he admitted it openly. Zhuowen's eyes were gloomy as he said coldly, "Are you saying that the talismans you gave Brother Jiang and Sister Yao are fake?" "I can't be biased, right? Of course it's fake." Ma Yujie laughed dryly. Zhuowen flicked his sleeves and said coldly, "Now, bring out the images of Brother Jiang and Junior Marshal Sister Yao. I want to see their current situation. If they're in danger, I'll hold you responsible." Zhuowen knew very well that once a cultivator had the 100 millionly talisman, they would have enough confidence. If they encountered danger, they would not think of running away. Instead, they would take the risk. After all, in their opinion, with such a powerful escape talisman, their lives were no longer in danger. Naturally, they would want to give it their all. What they didn't know was that the escape talisman they obtained was a fake. Once their lives were at stake, they would use the fake escape talisman, and everything would be too late. Zhuowen naturally didn't want to care about other people's lives, but Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan were his friends. Zhuowen couldn't ignore them, so he had to check on them first. Ma Yujie reluctantly brought out two images. They were the images of what Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan were experiencing. Zhuowen found that Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan were exploring a dangerous place with two other people. Zhuowen wasn't unfamiliar with the other two people. These two people were also two of the 5 great evildoers of the host region. They were a man and a woman. The man was the Void Palace's Shuqingshin, and the woman was the Fallen Star Mountain's Xingjing. Speaking of which, when Jiang Qixing had introduced Zhuowen and said that Zhuowen had saved his life, Xingjing had looked disdainful. He had thought that Jiang Qixing was talking nonsense. After all, Zhuowen's cultivation aura was only that of the Lord of Mystery. Zhuowen didn't mind the attitude Xingjing had given him back then, because he knew that this was human nature. If it were him, and he didn't know a person's background, and only knew that the other party was the Lord of Profound Secrets, he naturally wouldn't believe that this person had any ability. What Zhuowen cared about now was that the dangerous place these 4 people had entered wasn't ordinary. Moreover, the 4 of them had encountered rather troublesome problems in this dangerous place. Xingjing and Yao Xiangjuan were even injured. However, from the expressions of these 4 people, it could be seen that they didn't intend to retreat. Obviously, they had the billion-mile talisman, so they were very confident that they could retreat safely. No, I have to warn them. Zhuowen took out a communication jade talisman and sent the information about the billion-mile talisman to Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing. Then he called Ma Yujie, and the 2 of them entered the gear zone. Ma Yujie's face was full of reluctance. He knew that Zhuowen had entered this time to save his friends first, while he wanted to find Gong Gong's body first. However, he didn't raise any objections. After all, he was the one who'd taken out the fake billion-mile talisman, so he was responsible for it. Besides, he had to rely on Zhuowen to extract the ancestral shaman blood essence. He didn't know how to do it himself. In the depths of the gear zone, apart from the illusory gears of all shapes and sizes, there were also many dangerous places. Some of these places were large, while others were small, and all of them contained more or less danger. Generally speaking, those who could make it through these dangerous places would be able to obtain more or less good things. Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan hadn't been in the gear zone for long when they ran into Shuqingshin and Xingjing, who'd teamed up. Shuqingshin and Xingjing had provided them with information that they'd found a dangerous place with a divine herb garden. The herbs inside were basically all creation-grade divine herbs, and there were even destination-grade divine herbs. This news moved Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan, so the 4 of them teamed up to venture into the dangerous place. This was a dangerous place surrounded by sheer cliffs and precipitous cliffs. Jiang Qixing and the others walked through a narrow gorge. On both sides of the gorge were jagged rocks of strange shapes. It was extremely dangerous. At this moment, the 4 of them were exhausted from dealing with countless black shadows that swept over from the front of the gorge. Upon closer inspection, these black shadows were actually bats with glowing red eyes. There were simply too many of these red-eyed bats, and none of them were weak. Yao Xiangjuan and Xingjing were careless and were injured. Even Jiang Qixing and Shuqingshin, who were slightly stronger, felt the pressure and gradually couldn't hold on any longer. There are too many of these bats. I'm afraid we can't handle them all. Brother Jiang, let's retreat first. Shuqingshin's forehead was covered in cold sweat as he spoke to Jiang Qixing. Jiang Qixing's gaze was somewhat unwilling, but he could only helplessly say, "It seems that it's impossible for us to enter the divine herb garden in the depths of the gorge. Let's retreat first." As he spoke, Jiang Qixing tossed out a sphere. The sphere instantly exploded, and a terrifying wave of fire swept out, engulfing the red-eyed bats at the very front. Then Jiang Qixing and Shuqingshin quickly retreated with Yao Xiangjuan and Xingjing. However, as they retreated, Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan's communication jade talismans lit up. The 2 of them immediately took out their communication jade talismans. When they saw it, their faces first lit up with joy, but soon a trace of gloom appeared in their eyes. Chapter 2998. Red-eyed Bat Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing's eyes flashed with a trace of anger because the message Zhuowen sent them was about the 100 million talismans Ma Yujie gave them. The 100 million-mile talisman that Zhuo Wen had mentioned was fake. Ma Yujie had set up a corresponding formation on an ordinary talisman and made it look like a 100 million-mile talisman. The reason why he had given them the talisman was because he had set up a surveillance formation on the talisman. He was using them as free explorers. Moreover, the message also mentioned that Ma Yujie didn't just give out these 2 talismans. He gave them to both human and foreign cultivators. Junior sister Xingjing, senior brother Su. Do you have the 100 million talismans on you? Yao Xiangjuan put away the communication jade talisman and looked at Su Qinshin and Xingjing beside her with a grave expression. Su Qinshin and Xingjing were taken aback and nodded subconsciously. Although these talismans were important, Yao Xiangjuan wasn't an outsider. Since she asked, they naturally had no reason to hide it. Did a fatty give you the 100 million talismans when you were outside? Jiang Qixing asked with an ugly expression. Su Chenshin and Xingjing looked at each other and realized that something was wrong. They nodded. We have them too. That fatty gave them to us. Jiang Qixing took out the 100 million talismans from his spirit ring. His voice became very strange. What? That fatty clearly said that they were the only 2 talismans he had. He gave them to us because of the forces behind us. How come you have them too? Xingjing asked in surprise. It's very simple. These talismans are fake. Jiang Qixing said and poured heavenly energy into the talisman. Suddenly, the talisman lit up with a white light and then collapsed. Jiang Qixing himself was still in the same place. He didn't fly away at all. It's really fake? Su Qinshin and Xingjing frowned slightly and also activated the talismans they took out. They found that the talismans they took out were exactly the same as Jiang Qixing's. They all turned into white light and collapsed. After discovering that the talisman was fake, the 4 of them felt a wave of lingering fear in their hearts. Fortunately, they had retreated in advance and obtained such important information. Otherwise, they might really have rushed into the depths of the canyon without caring about the consequences. After all, they had millions of talismans on them. With a 100-million-mile talisman, they were not afraid of danger at all. Unless their lives were in danger, they could use the 100-million-mile talisman to escape. However, their 100 million-miles talisman was fake. If they really risked their lives to enter the danger zone and disregarded the cost, they would really be out of luck once they encountered a life-threatening situation. Thinking of this, their bodies trembled and fear appeared in their eyes. Let's go back first. This is not a good place either. Xingjing's beautiful eyes revealed a hint of fear. She began to retreat and suggested to the others, now that we don't have the escape talismans to save our lives, staying here isn't a good idea. Let's get out of here. Su Qinshin said decisively. The 4 of them reached an agreement and returned to where they came from. However, what they didn't see was that in the depths of the canyon, a pair of incomparably huge scarlet eyes slowly appeared and coldly stared at the 4 of them as they left. Along the way, Xingjing looked at Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing curiously and asked, Brother Jiang, Junior Sister Yao, how did you know that we also had the 100-million-mile talisman and that it was fake? Yao Xiangjuan smiled and said, A friend of mine sent us a message and told us. Which friend is it? His message helped us a lot. Su Qinshen hurriedly said, He's Long Wen. You should have seen him when he entered the door of darkness. Jiang Qixing smiled. It's him. Xingjing's beautiful eyes widened. Xingjing had a deep impression of Long Wen. When Jiang Qixing first came to the door of darkness, she had seen Long Wen when she came out to greet him. However, Long Wen's aura was too weak. He was only the Lord of Mystery. Back then, when Jiang Qixing said that Long Wen had saved them from Ihan Fei, she didn't believe him and thought that Jiang Qixing was deliberately saying that to elevate Long Wen. However, later, Long Wen easily defeated Chao Kongqing and suppressed Elder MDA of the Merfolk clan in the Yin and Yang Divine Sex team, which changed her opinion of him a lot. She knew that this wasn't a simple task. Of course, Xingjing still felt a little ashamed. If she had known that Long Wen was a genuine genius, her previous disdain and contempt for him would have been too laughable. Just as Xingjing's thoughts were running wild, a deafening shriek rang out from the depths of the canyon and went straight to their eardrums, as if it wanted to shatter their ears. Jiang Qixing, Yao Xiangjuan, Su Qinshin, and Xingjing's expressions changed drastically. They couldn't help but cover their ears and release their divine senses to investigate the source of the sound. The four of them immediately trembled in fright and used their movement techniques to flee out of the canyon. In their divine senses, a pair of incomparably huge scarlet eyes were rapidly approaching from the depths of the canyon. As the pair of scarlet eyes approached, an aura that made them feel fear came crushing down, making them feel as if they were facing the might of the heavens. This exotic beast is very terrifying. It's at least a peak creator. The four of us aren't a match for it, even if we join forces. Run. The moment Jiang Qixing sensed the terrifying aura, he was shocked and hurriedly transmitted a message to the other three. Of course, even without Jiang Qixing's reminder, the other three also knew how terrifying the exotic beast behind them was, and used their movement techniques to flee for their lives. As the shriek got closer and closer, it became more and more deafening. Jiang Qixing and the other three's divine senses finally saw the true appearance of the exotic beast chasing behind them. It was an extremely huge red-eyed bat. It was hundreds of feet long and almost filled most of the canyon. Around this huge red-eyed bat, there were countless smaller red-eyed bats. These bats were like the most loyal guards, guarding this huge red-eyed bat. The huge red-eyed bat suddenly roared, and the densely packed smaller red-eyed bats immediately echoed it and flew out at an extremely fast speed, catching up to Jiang Qixing and the other three in an instant. Bang, bang, bang. After these smaller red-eyed bats caught up to Jiang Qixing and the other three, they exploded. The power of the explosion spread into the four's bodies, causing their speed to drop significantly. These little bats are burning their essence blood to increase their speed. They're using their lives to hinder us. Chapter 2999. Rescue everyone, don't hold back. Take out your trump cards, or you'll die here today. Su Qinshin narrowed his eyes, revealing a trace of ruthlessness. With a wave of his sleeve, a divine sword glowing with gray light appeared in his hand. The surface of the divine sword was covered with dense patterns, and as it flickered with gray light, it was difficult to distinguish the color of the divine sword from the surrounding void. It was as if the divine sword had merged with the surrounding void. Su Qinshin roared and slashed out with the divine sword. Suddenly, the void in front of him distorted. An illusory sword ray appeared in the distorted void and suddenly swept out. Everywhere it passed, the small red-eyed bats behind it were all crushed into powder by the illusory sword ray. The moment Su Qinshin used his trump card, Xingjing was not to be outdone. She took out a disc covered in starlight and waved it. Starlight spread out like the sharpest hidden weapon in the world. Any bat that was hit by the starlight screamed and exploded into a bloody mist. Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing each took out a blue longsword. Jiang Qixing also took out a divine sword, but Jiang Qixing's divine sword was wider and heavier. The two of them swung their swords at the same time, splitting the sky and earth. The four of them used all their trump cards and killed all the small bats behind them in just a few breaths. After doing all this, just as the four of them were about to continue their escape, a terrifying gale swept over them like a whistling meteor. Their expressions changed slightly, and they all took out their trump cards and divine weapons to block in front of them. Bang! The four of them were all knocked back by the gust of wind. Among them, Yao Xiangjuan and Xingjing, who were already injured, spat out a mouthful of blood. Their injuries worsened. Jiang Qixing and Su Qinshin supported Yao Xiangjuan and Xingjing and wanted to continue fleeing, but they found that their way back was blocked by countless small red-eyed bats. It would take them some time to break through so many small red-eyed bats. But now they clearly did not have that much time, because the enormous red-eyed bat had already landed in front of them. A pair of scarlet eyes stared straight at the four of them. The four of them could see intense greed and desire in its eyes. It was obvious that the giant bat saw the four of them as its prey. Boom! The giant bat shrieked, and its huge wings were like the sharpest blades in the world, sweeping towards the four of them. The four of them had no choice but to use their trump cards to block in front of them, hoping to block the giant bat's attack. Bang, bang, bang. The giant bat attacked without any regard for its life. In an instant, it blasted out nearly 100 attacks, causing the four of them to be in an extremely sorry state. It was very difficult for them to resist. In addition to the giant bats, the surrounding small bats were also attacking without any regard for their lives, causing the pressure on the four of them to increase sharply. We can't go on like this. Are we going to die here today? Xing Jing's face was incomparably pale. She struggled to urge the heavenly energy in her body. The starlight on the disc in her hand became even more resplendent, resisting the attacks of the countless bats in the surroundings. Xu Qinshin smiled bitterly, but he fell silent. His heart was also filled with despair. This was definitely a hopeless situation. At least for him, he did not have the ability to escape from this terrifying situation. The final result was that he would be exhausted to death by these suicidal bats. Don't be discouraged, the two of you. Let's hold on a little longer. Brother Long will be here soon to save us. Jiang Qixing's eyes were bright. He and Yao Xiangjuan had already received a message from Zhuowen and knew that Zhuowen was rushing towards them. Even though the giant bat before them was extremely powerful and wasn't any weaker than a pinnacle god of creation, they were still filled with confidence in Zhuowen. It should be known that Zhuowen was an existence that had even killed Sauron of the Merfolk clan. His strength definitely surpassed the majority of god of creation powerhouses. As long as Zhuowen could arrive, they would be saved. Xu Qinshin smiled bitterly. Brother Jiang, you are too optimistic. Longwen does have some strength, but even if he comes, he will only add another corpse to the pile. Not to mention the huge number of red-eyed bats around us. Just this 1,000-foot-long Bat King's strength is already at the pinnacle of the Creator realm. Together with these smaller bats, it's probably able to fight against a half-step Creator realm expert. Longwen can't possibly be a match for these bats. Xu Qinshin and Xing Jing both looked dejected. They had not counted on the Longwen mentioned by Jiang Qixing. We believe in Brother Long. As long as we hold on a little longer, we will be able to wait for Brother Long to arrive. Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing's eyes were filled with determination. Xu Qinshin and Xing Jing had no choice but to hold on to a hopeless situation and fight side by side with Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing against the attacks around them. At this moment, two uninvited guests had arrived outside the canyon. One was a youth with 2 scars on his face, and the other was a pot-bellied fatty. They should be inside the canyon. Let's go in. That's right, Brother Ma. You have to call me Longwen in front of outsiders. Don't mention my real name. Zhuowen glanced at the canyon and planned to enter, but before entering, he reminded Ma Yujie about his fake name. Ma Yujie naturally promised that he wouldn't spill the beans. Soon after, he reluctantly followed Zhuowen into the canyon. We can't hold on much longer. It looks like we really won't be able to escape this time. Xing Jing spat out a mouthful of blood. Her pretty face drained of color. The starlight disk in her hand had become extremely dim and was no longer as resplendent as it was at the beginning. Not only Xing Jing, but Yao Xiangjuan was also not much better off. Her hair was disheveled and countless cracks had appeared on the divine sword in her hand. Although Jiang Qixing and Xu Qinshin were in a better state, they were not much better off. They had both suffered heavy injuries. Crack! Finally, a soft cracking sound rang out. Their combined defense was completely shattered, and the four of them spat out mouthfuls of blood and were sent flying. Swoosh! Swoosh! The moment they were sent flying, the surrounding bats enveloped the four of them like a wave. They bared their sharp fangs and intended to suck their blood essence. Bang! 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 However, just as the bat swarm engulfed the four of them, an extremely powerful saber ray came from behind them. Buzz! 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 The saber ray contained an unparalleled domineering intent, and the sweeping bat swarm was instantly shredded to pieces by the saber ray. A figure quickly swept over and finally stopped in front of Jiang Qixing, Yao Xiangjuan, Xingjing, and Xu Qinshin. Chapter 3000. Pursuit, Brother Ma. Help me take care of them first. I'll deal with these beasts first. The man instructed the pot-bellied fatty behind him. Then, with a stomp of his right foot, he rushed toward the giant bat. He grabbed at the air with both hands, and two giant white blades appeared in his hands. They possessed a terrifying power that could shake the heavens and earth. When the giant bat saw that its descendants had been killed so cleanly, a terrifying killing intent burst out of its eyes. With a sharp cry, it pounced toward Zhuowen. Zhuowen was not afraid. Holding the sky-splitting blades with both hands, he ruthlessly collided with the giant bat. Bang! 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 In an instant, Zhuowen and the giant bat engaged in a fierce battle. The terrifying aftermath of the battle spread out, distorting the surrounding void, causing the sky to fall and the earth to crack. The canyon shook. Zhuowen exclaimed softly. He realized that the giant bat was not weak. It was strong enough to fight against a half-step creation lord. In an instant, it suppressed him. The giant bat was also shocked by the strength of the human in front of it. It was not killed in a single exchange. It's you? On Ma Yujia's side, Yao Xiangjuan, Jiang Qixing, Xingjing, and Xu Qinshin glared at him when they saw that the person in front of them was the fatty who had given them the talisman. Facing their angry gazes, Ma Yujia was very thick-skinned and did not feel embarrassed at all. He coughed dryly and said indifferently, I'm Long Wen's friend. Since Long Wen handed you over to me, I naturally have to take good care of you. All right, stay away for now. With that, Ma Yujia waved his sleeve. Jiang Qixing and the other three involuntarily floated up and retreated to a safe distance with Ma Yujia. Jiang Qixing and the other three's expressions changed slightly. They looked at Ma Yujia with extreme fear. Although the four of them were seriously injured, it was not to the extent that they could not resist. However, when the fat man waved his sleeve, the power that surged out made them unable to resist at all. They could only be led away by him. It was clear that the fatty's strength was not ordinary. Even if the four of them were at their peak, they might not necessarily be a match for the fatty in front of them. Thinking of this, deep fear appeared in their eyes. Ma Yujia, since you are Brother Long's friend, why did you give us the fake billion-mile talisman? As a friend, are you going to harm your friend's friend like this? Yao Xiangjuan snorted coldly. Ma Yujia's expression was natural as he said, I'm the one who gave it to you, but whether you accept it or not is up to you. Did I force you to give it to me? Didn't I just give you a talisman? Was there a need to be so serious? I didn't harm your lives, but you almost got us killed. If we didn't believe in the talisman you gave us, we wouldn't have entered such a dangerous place. This completely messed up our plan to enter this dangerous place. If Brother Long hadn't appeared in time, I'm afraid we would have died here. Jiang Qixing said with an unkind expression. Ma Yujia shrugged and said, If you want to vent your anger on me, I don't care. If any of you are unhappy, you can take revenge on me. I won't stop you. You shameless. Xingjing's beautiful eyes glared, thinking that this fatty was too thick-skinned. They could see that this fatty was stronger than them, and they were seriously injured. Asking them to take revenge on him was just courting death. Since you don't plan to take revenge on me, then it's settled. Anyway, you are all saved by us in time. Everyone is happy. Don't think about these unhappy things. Thinking too much will only make you worry. Ma Yujie shook his head and said. Jiang Qixing and the others glared at him, but there was nothing they could do. This fatty was too thick-skinned and too shameless. Even if they condemned him, this fatty probably wouldn't feel guilty. Ah, look, Longwen is being suppressed by the bat. Xing Jing suddenly cried out, attracting the attention of the others. Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan immediately looked worried. This time, Zhuowen came for them. If Zhuowen was injured because of them, they would feel guilty. At this moment, on the battlefield, Zhuowen was indeed being suppressed by the bat with the sky splitting blade in his hand. This red-eyed bat's strength was roughly at the half-step creator realm, but its physical body was extremely terrifying. Zhuowen was indeed at a disadvantage in a head-on clash. Of course, if Zhuowen used the Ho-E Godly Arrow, he could get rid of this red-eyed bat. However, there were outsiders here now, so Zhuowen naturally couldn't use this trump card so easily. Brother Ma, take them out of here first. I'll be right behind you. Zhuowen instructed Ma Yujie and transmitted his voice to Jiang Qixing and the others, telling them to leave with Ma Yujie first and that he would be right behind them. Jiang Qixing and the others also knew that the current situation was critical. Although Zhuowen was at a disadvantage, it didn't seem like his life was in danger. Therefore, they left with Ma Yujie first. After seeing Ma Yujie leave with Jiang Qixing, Yao Xiangjuan, and the others, Zhuowen heaved a sigh of relief and looked coldly at the red-eyed but that was fighting desperately in front of him. I had a great time beating you up just now. It's my turn now. Zhuowen smiled wickedly. Then, with a wave of his sleeve, he took out the Ho-E Godly Bow and the Genesis Divine Arrow from his great world. Zhuowen held the bow in his left hand and knocked the Genesis Divine Arrow on the bowstring in his right hand. Zhuowen didn't plan to take out the Ho-E Godly Arrow. In his opinion, this red-eyed bat wasn't worthy of him using the Ho-E Godly Arrow. Boom! Zhuowen pulled the bowstring back to 2/3 of its original length. The terrifying killing intent was like a falling mountain. It was very frightening and frightening. The red-eyed bat immediately sensed this terrifying killing intent. A trace of fear appeared in its scarlet eyes as it stared fixedly at Zhuowen. To be more precise, it was staring at the Ho-E Godly Bow in Zhuowen's hand. It felt the fear of death from it. Whoosh! Zhuowen released the bowstring. The surface of the divine arrow was suddenly filled with a terrifying blood-red light. Then it turned into a streak of blood-red light and shot into the sky. It was extremely fast as it swept towards the red-eyed bat. The red-eyed bat felt the threat of death. It screeched and gathered all the small bats around it in front of it, forming a powerful meat shield. Puff! Puff! Unfortunately, the meat shield formed by the small bats couldn't withstand a single blow. It was pierced through by the divine arrow. Puff! The divine arrow was too fast. After piercing through the meat shield, it disappeared in front of the red-eyed bat. The red-eyed bat gathered all the energy in its body, hoping to block the divine arrow. But in the end, it failed. In the end, the divine arrow pierced into the red-eyed bat's body and exploded with terrifying energy. The red-eyed bat screeched and exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Zhuowen waved his right hand and collected the scattered divine arrow. Just as he was about to return, he found that the cloud of blood mist was condensing and reforming into the giant red-eyed bat. After the red-eyed bat reformed, it screeched again and fled into the depths of the canyon. Bastard, do you think you can escape? Chapter 3001. Solve in the gloomy canyon. Strange rocks were everywhere, and the terrain was steep. Zhuowen sped through the canyon, looking at the red-eyed bat in front of him that he could not catch up with. His face turned ugly. The red-eyed bat had used a secret technique to reconstruct its body. The side effects were not small, and it was even slower than Zhuowen. However, the red-eyed bat was too familiar with the canyon's terrain. It flew left and right, and every turn was beyond Zhuowen's expectations. Every time Zhuowen was about to catch up, he would discover that the red-eyed bat would take another turn. Even Zhuowen did not expect that turn, allowing the red-eyed bat to easily shake off Zhuowen. "Bastard, let's see how long you can run." Zhuowen stomped his feet and actually used the space-time ability. His entire body was like a ghost, flashing and flying in the void. His speed was extremely fast, leaving only afterimages in the void. Every time his afterimages appeared and disappeared, there would be slight ripples in the void. As Zhuowen continued to flash, the distance between Zhuowen and the red-eyed bat was constantly shortening. Hiss! The red-eyed bat also discovered that Zhuowen had suddenly sped up behind it. It hissed, and there was a trace of fear in its voice. However, very quickly, the red-eyed bat's eyes revealed a determined look. Soon after, its wings lit up with a bloody light, and the former's speed suddenly soared. "It's actually burning its blood essence," Zhuowen frowned slightly. The red-eyed bat's wings suddenly lit up with a terrifying red light. It was the sign of burning its blood essence. The red-eyed bat's speed was not slow. Now that it was burning its blood essence, its speed was even faster. Even if Zhuowen used the space-time ability, it would be difficult to catch up to the beast. However, Zhuowen also knew that the red-eyed bat would not be able to hold on for long after burning its blood essence. In addition, he was already deep into the canyon. If he were to retreat like this, it would not be worth it. Several hours later, the red-eyed bat let out a miserable cry and fell into the depths of the canyon. It landed on a sharp stone pillar, and the stone pillar was completely dyed blood red. Zhuowen stopped not too far away from the stone pillar. He indifferently looked at the red-eyed bat on the blood-stained stone pillar. He did not attack because he could see that the red-eyed bat would not be able to live for long. After all, it had burned its blood essence too much. It could not even suppress the injuries on its body. "Let me send you on your last journey." Zhuowen waved his sleeve, and a blade of air shot out, smashing into the red-eyed bat's body and finishing it off. After dealing with the red-eyed bats, Zhuowen's gaze fell on the back of the stone pillar. There was a huge cave there. The cave was shaped like the mouth of a ferocious beast. Two sharp stone pillars lined up on both sides of the cave, looking like the teeth of a giant beast. This should be the deepest part of the canyon, and this cave should be the nest of the red-eyed bats. Brother Jiang sent me a message saying that there is a divine herb garden in the depths of the canyon. It should be in this nest. Zhuowen muttered to himself. He took out a communication jade talisman and sent a message to Jiang Qixing, Ma Yujie, and the others. He told them that he had dealt with the red-eyed bat and then strode into the cave. There were almost no more red-eyed bats in the outermost area of the canyon. Ma Yujie led Jiang Qixing and the others to stand under a huge rock. They silently waited for Zhuowen's return. That red-eyed bat is not simple. I wonder if Brother Long can escape from it. Yao Shengjuan was still a little worried. Jiang Qixing hurriedly comforted her. Brother Long is very strong. He is not an ordinary person. Perhaps he is not a match for the red-eyed bat, but escaping from it should not be a problem. But Xingjing shook her beautiful head slightly and said, "You all are too optimistic, right? If the red-eyed bat burns its blood essence, its strength will increase. At that time, whether Longwen can escape or not is still a question." Yao Shengjuan and Jiang Qixing looked displeased. They looked at Xingjing. Xingjing also realized that she had said something wrong and hurriedly shut her mouth. Haha, with Brother Long's strength, he should be able to destroy that red-eyed bat. Ma Yujie, who had been silent all this time, spoke. He looked at the four people with a trace of mockery in his eyes. These people did not know how terrifying Zhuowen was. But Ma Yujie knew very well that a person who cultivated the Pangus sacred body was destined to be extraordinary. Moreover, Ma Yujie also knew that Zhuowen had other trump cards. It would not be difficult for him to kill a strange beast that was not even a creation lord. Jiang Qixing and the others only smiled at Ma Yujie's words. They did not take it to heart. Obviously, They believed that this fatty's words were not reliable. Brother Long sent a message. Jiang Qixing suddenly took out a communication jade talisman. After looking at it for a while, he said with a strange expression, Brother Long said that he has dealt with the red-eyed bat. He has found a cave in the deepest part of the canyon. He wants us to go there. What? He really disposed of that red-eyed bat. That guy's strength is really that strong. Xing Jing turned pale with fright as he spoke. Don't be so surprised. That guy's strength is unimaginable. Let's go to the deepest part of the canyon first. Ma Yujie shrugged. He did not care about the shock of Jiang Qixing and the others. He took the lead and rushed into the depths of the canyon. Jiang Qixing and the others hesitated for a while before following him. When they reached the stone pillar in the deepest part of the canyon and saw the blood-stained red-eyed bat on the pillar, they finally believed the authenticity of Zhuowen's message. The red-eyed bat was really killed. Did Brother Long do all this alone? Jiang Qixing looked at the corpse of the giant red-eyed bat in front of him and the countless small bat corpses he had seen along the way. He was shocked. He was not the only one who was shocked. Yao Xiangjuan, Xing Jing, and Zechinshin were also shocked. They found it unbelievable. At the same time, they also felt deep respect for Longwen. They knew that the latter's strength was far beyond their imagination. Longwen's strength is probably comparable to top geniuses like Zhongli Haoyan and the Phoenix People Saintess. Zechinshin smiled bitterly. Everyone else nodded in agreement. Ma Yujie was very calm. He looked at the cave in front of him and said indifferently, This cave should be the red-eyed bat's nest that Brother Long mentioned in his message. Is the divine herb garden in this cave? Yes. Jiang Qixing nodded. Then let's go in, Ma Yujie said, and rushed into the cave impatiently. Jiang Qixing and the others were shocked by his eagerness. Was this fatty in such a hurry because he was afraid that Zhuowen would take all the good things inside? Chapter 3002. Allocating the divine herbs. There was a winding tunnel in the cave. In the deepest part of the cave, Zhuowen stopped in a huge open space. The originally dark and gloomy cave became much brighter and warmer when they reached this place. The reason for this was that the open space was open air. Golden sunlight shone down from the outside, causing this open space to be out of tune with the surrounding environment. Is this a formation? Zhuowen looked at the open space, shrouded in golden sunlight, and slowly stepped inside. Immediately, he felt rich heavenly Tao energy surge into his body. The quality of this heavenly Tao energy was very high. After entering his meridians, he didn't even need to refine it before it became a part of his body. Zhuowen was pleasantly surprised. He could already confirm that this place, shrouded in sunlight, was a formation. However, this formation was very mysterious and ancient. Zhuowen couldn't tell what level this formation was exactly, but he knew that it shouldn't be low. At the same time, he also noticed that there was a large herb garden at the center of the formation. There were all kinds of divine herbs planted in the garden. Every divine herb had perfect divinity. Flying Cloud Splendor Divine Flower, Celestial Master Een Divine Lotus, Jade Lunar Divine Leaf. Zhuowen looked around the divine herb garden and found that there were no less than 100 divine herbs here. Moreover, all of them were Genesis divine herbs. To be honest, Zhuowen was a little disappointed. He actually had a lot of Genesis divine herbs, but he didn't have many creation divine herbs. He had most of the Genesis great herbs in the divine medicinal garden with him. Of course, Genesis divine herbs were divine, herbs of the third step of Tao validation after all. They were very precious. The more divine herbs of this level, the better. However, Zhuowen didn't immediately pick these divine herbs. Instead, he put his clone into the great world and left his main body sitting cross-legged outside the divine herb garden. He was waiting for Jiang Qixing and the others to arrive. After all, this place had been discovered by them. He wouldn't go so low as to touch these divine herbs first. After a while, Zhuowen heard footsteps. He knew that Jiang Qixing and the others had arrived. Ma Yujie was the first to arrive, followed by Jiang Qixing and Yao Shangjuan. The first thing they saw was Zhuowen, who was seated cross-legged on the ground, and then they quickly noticed the divine medicinal garden beside Zhuowen. There really is a divine medicinal garden here. Furthermore, this divine medicinal garden is actually filled with Genesis-level divine medicines. This is truly inconceivable. Xingjing was dazzled. Looking at the Genesis-grade divine herbs, her beautiful eyes were filled with longing. Jiang Qixing, Yao Xiangjuan, and Su Qinxin were also stunned by the sight of the divine herb garden. This was the first time they had seen so many creation-grade herbs. Ma Yujie glanced sideways at Jiang Qixing and the others and shrugged with a look of disdain. He thought that these people were simply country bumpkins who were so surprised by a mere Genesis-level elixir. Ma Yujie slowly walked towards the divine medicinal garden and arrived beside Zhuowen. He said indifferently, "Brother Long, it's all because of the two of us that your friends were saved and were able to reach this place. We can split the divine medicinal garden equally." Jiang Qixing and the others glared at him. If it was Long Wen who had suggested this, they naturally wouldn't have objected. However, this fatty hadn't helped at all. It was Long Wen who had killed the red-eyed bat. Yet this fatty was shamelessly asking for an equal share of the divine medicinal garden. Zhuowen glanced sideways at Ma Yujie and said indifferently, "Brother Ma, perhaps you're old and blind. I was the one who killed the red-eyed bat, and I was the one who discovered this divine medicinal garden. What does it have to do with you?" Ma Yujie did not feel awkward at all. He pointed at Jiang Qixing and the others and said, "Brother Long, I helped you protect the four of them. If it weren't for me, how could the four of them be unscathed right now?" Jiang Qixing and the others glared at him furiously. This fatty was just too good at bullshitting. Even without this fatty, Zhuowen would have been able to keep the red-eyed bat busy, and the four of them would have been able to retreat easily. All right, there's no need to argue. I've already thought about the distribution of the divine medicinal garden. We'll just split it equally between the six of us. Also, having you realize that the most precious thing in this place isn't the divine medicinal garden, but the formation around it? Zhuowen stood up and said slowly. Ma Yujie frowned, but he did not refute. It was not worth it to fall out with Zhuowen over a mere Genesis-level elixir. After all, he had come here to cooperate with Zhuowen in order to obtain Gonggong's physical body. Jiang Qixing and the others were pleasantly surprised. It was all thanks to Zhuowen that they were able to reach this place. If Zhuowen wanted to take the entire divine medicinal garden, they would not have any complaints. But now, Zhuowen wanted to split it equally with them. To them, this was simply a gift from the heavens. This formation can actually provide such pure heavenly Tao energy, and the climate it creates is the best environment for elixirs to grow. This formation is probably specially used to cultivate this divine medicinal garden. Speaking of which, this kind of formation that is specially used to cultivate elixirs is generally not very popular. Very few divine formation masters learn this kind of formation. I didn't expect to see it here. Ma Yujie walked into the formation and felt the endless heavenly Tao energy coming from the formation. A trace of surprise appeared in his eyes. Jiang Qixing and the others naturally followed him in. They were all excited. The heavenly Tao energy here was probably tens of thousands of times more than outside. Cultivating here for a year was probably equivalent to cultivating for tens of thousands of years outside. Let's distribute the elixirs first. After that, we will cultivate here for a period of time before leaving, Zhuowen said. Ma Yujie was rather hesitant. He was impatient to head to where Gonggong's physical body was stored. He did not want to waste any time here. Brother Ma, you don't have to be in such a hurry. This gear zone is very big. Getting out of this zone isn't something that can be done in a short period of time. While we cultivate here, we can analyze the images on your body. our chances of finding the true exit will be greater. It's much better than exploring aimlessly outside. Zhuan's voice rang out in Ma Yujia's head. Ma Yujia thought for a while before reluctantly accepting Zhuan's suggestion in the end. Next, the 6 of them divided the elixirs in the divine medicinal garden equally. They each found a place to cultivate and absorb the heavenly Tao energy that was so dense that it delighted them. Chapter 3003. Breaking Through to the Eternal Overlord Realm Whoosh. Zhuan's absorption of the heavenly law energy was huge. The boundless heavenly law energy around him formed one energy storm after another. It was extremely violent. Fortunately, the place Zhuan chose was a relatively remote place within the array formation. Otherwise, such a huge commotion would definitely affect the cultivation of others. Even so, Zhuan's momentum frightened Jiang Qixing and the others. They all opened their eyes and stared at Zhuan, dumbfounded. Heavens, Brother Long is simply a freak. He's clearly just the Lord of Profound Secrets, so why is he absorbing so much heavenly law energy? Jiang Qixing exclaimed in surprise. Brother Long isn't an ordinary person. The Lord of Profound Secrets already has such terrifying strength, so it shouldn't be a big deal that his cultivation is so loud. Although Yao Xiangjuan was shocked, she could still accept it. Xingjing and Su Chunxin gulped inwardly, looking at Zhuan with even more reverence. Ma Yujia, on the other hand, glanced at Zhuan, curled his lips, and muttered, "This fatty can't be suppressed by this guy's momentum." As he spoke, small vortexes appeared one after another around Ma Yujia. Soon after, countless vortexes produced an endless suction force that swallowed the surrounding heavenly law energy. In an instant, the momentum created by Ma Yujia was no weaker than Zhuan's. Jiang Qixing and the others were even more dumbfounded. This fatty's cultivation momentum was so terrifying that they were truly shocked. But soon, the 4 of them thought of something. Since this fatty could become Long Wen's friend, he was probably a genius on the same level as him. Thinking of this, Jiang Qixing and the others didn't dare to underestimate this fatty. Let's cultivate too. The heavenly law energy in this formation is limited. Let's try to absorb as much as possible and use it to break through to the next realm. Jiang Qixing came back to his senses and hurriedly said this. Then he began to cultivate meticulously. Now was not the time to be in a daze. Zhuo Wen and Ma Yujia were simply freaks. With their speed, it would not take long for them to absorb all the heavenly energy in this place. Then they would be left with nothing to eat. If he didn't seize the opportunity to cultivate now, wouldn't it be a waste of this opportunity? Time passed by, and in the blink of an eye, 10 days had passed. On this day, the sound of something shattering could be heard from within the formation. At this moment, the heavenly energy within the formation was much thinner than before. Kacha! The array had completely collapsed, and the rich heavenly energy in the area had also completely disappeared. The moment the formation collapsed, a vast and majestic energy soared into the sky. Jiang Qixing and the others suddenly stood up. Their eyes were full of joy. In the past 10 days, they had gained a lot. They had all advanced a small realm, and their strength had skyrocketed. But soon, they were attracted by the terrifying energy. Their gazes landed on where Zhuan was. Is Brother Long about to break through? Jiang Qixing and the others murmured in low voices and slowly retreated a distance. After all, the momentum of Zhuan's breakthrough was so great that they felt their breathing become unsteady. Ma Yujia's eyes flickered, and he also moved to the side, silently watching Zhuan break through. Bang, bang, bang. Zhuan's aura grew more and more terrifying. In the sky, the heavenly Tao sent down many strange phenomena, each of which was shocking enough to make ghosts and gods weep. What a terrifying phenomenon! Is this really the phenomenon of advancing to the eternal overlord realm? Why do I feel that the phenomenon produced by Brother Long's breakthrough is even more terrifying than that of a creator? Jiang Qixing stared at the phenomenon in the sky, and all of them were dumbstruck. They felt that it was inconceivable because this phenomenon was simply too terrifying. Even though they were all gods of creation, they couldn't muster up the slightest bit of resistance. However, Zhuowen was strolling leisurely, directly resisting the heavenly Tao phenomena under their incredulous gazes. Although Zhuowen was repeatedly blasted into the ground by the phenomena, Zhuowen climbed up from the ground again and again to face the even more terrifying phenomena. It was as if he had infinite energy. When the last phenomenon descended, Zhuowen's entire chest was pierced through with a wound several feet wide. The injury was extremely serious. They all thought that Zhuowen wouldn't be able to withstand the last phenomenon. But to their surprise, Zhuowen's wound healed rapidly, and he even withstood the last phenomenon. Bang! Zhuowen descended from the sky, his entire body emitting a dazzling radiance, as if he was made of glass. An unprecedentedly powerful aura burst forth from his body, as if the heavens and earth were condensed within him. Zhuowen's lips curved into a smile. He'd finally successfully advanced to the eternal Overlord realm. There were 3 minor realms in the second step of the Tao Proving Realm: the Master of Destiny, the Master of Mystery, and the Eternal Overlord. His original body had stayed at the Master of Mystery's realm for a long time. Now that he was in the gear zone, he finally broke through again and entered the Eternal Overlord realm by coincidence. Because his original body was born without a Tao root, it was heaven-defying and went against the principles of the Tao-proving realm. Therefore, his original body's combat strength couldn't be measured by the Eternal Overlord realm alone. Even if his original body's strength couldn't compare to the creator of the first realm of the third step of the Tao-proving realm, he was already invincible in the Eternal Overlord realm. Even a half-step creator might not necessarily be a match for his original body. Although Zhuowen's current strength mainly came from the Pangu sacred body cultivated by his clone, Zhuowen still loved his original body the most. After all, he was originally a human. His clone had taken over the infant devourer and grown into King Devour. Finally, he fused with the ancestral voodoo insect to form the current Pangu sacred body. Although his clone was powerful, it more or less had Panga's shadow in it. It had grown so quickly with the help of Panga's inheritance. But his original body was different. He went against the heavens and cultivated step by step. Just from the time he cultivated, his original body could be called a top genius in the Xian-Mi heavenly domain for being able to reach the Eternal Overlord realm so quickly. And his original body didn't have a Tao root. He was even more talented than top geniuses like Zhongli, Haoyan, and Yi Qidong. Brother Long, congratulations. You've successfully broken through to the Eternal Overlord realm. Ma Yujie cupped his hands at Zhuowen, a meaningful look in his eyes. Zhuowen glanced at Ma Yujie and found that the latter was sizing him up with a thoughtful look. He was slightly moved. Did this fatty see something? Jiang Qixing and the other 3 also came to Zhuowen and congratulated him. Their faces were filled with joy. They were sincerely happy for Zhuowen's breakthrough. All right, Brother Ma and I plan to go to the place where Gong Gong's body is stored. I wonder if you'd like to come with us? Zhuowen suddenly asked. Xingjing hesitated for a moment, then cupped his hands at Zhuowen and said apologetically, Brother Su and I were separated from our fellow disciples when we entered this place. So we plan to find our fellow disciples first, then go to the place where Gong Gong's body is stored together. Xingjing nodded. Clearly, he and Xingjing had already discussed this beforehand. Since you 2 have other matters to attend to, I won't keep you any longer. Be careful along the way. Zhuowen said cautiously. Chapter 3004. Grouping watching Xingjing and Su Qinshin leave, Zhuowen turned around and looked at Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing. Jiang Qixing chuckled and said, Brother Long, as you know, my brothers and sisters have all been killed by that damned Ihanfei, so I don't need to look for them. Now that I'm all alone, I plan to follow you. Although Yao Xiangjuan didn't say anything, she looked at Zhuowen with determination. Zhuowen knew that Yao Xiangjuan's decision was the same as Jiang Qixing's. If that's the case, Then you too will follow me. Zhuowen nodded, but Ma Yujie's expression didn't look too good. Didn't he say that it would be just the two of them? Why did he bring Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing along? However, Ma Yujie didn't say anything. He had spent some time with Zhuowen, so he had some understanding of the latter's personality. He knew that once Zhuowen decided on something, he wouldn't change his mind easily. Even if he objected, it would be a waste of effort. Zhuowen looked at Ma Yujie and asked, "Brother Ma, I see that you've also been studying the route of this gear zone. Are you confident that you can leave this zone?" Ma Yujie snorted and said, "Among the cultivators who entered the door of darkness, except for Zhongli Haoyan Yi Qidong, the Phoenix People Saintess, and a few other top geniuses who didn't accept my talismans, everyone else basically accepted them. During this period, 1/3 of the images have disappeared, while the remaining 2/3 are intact. However, the directions shown in these images are obviously wrong. After eliminating these wrong directions, I have carefully selected 2 directions. One of these 2 directions must be the correct direction." Speaking of this, Ma Yujie took out a map from his spirit ring. This map could be simulated. The map Ma Yujie took out was blank, so he probably hadn't drawn a specific map and direction yet. Ma Yujie formed a seal with his right hand and began to draw a specific map on the map. Soon, Ma Yujie drew a rough map. He handed the map to Zhuowen and said, "This is the rough topographic map of the gear zone that I have drawn after many days of observation." Zhuowen took the map and looked at it. He found that there were many red crosses on the map. There was no need for Ma Yujie to explain the markings. Zhuowen also knew that these places were impassable and dangerous. One of them was the canyon where Zhuowen and the others were at. Ma Yujie had also marked this place with a red cross. Among the many red crosses, there were 2 green marks that were rather conspicuous. "Are these the 2 directions that you said might be the correct ones?" Zhuowen asked as he pointed at the 2 green markings on the map. "Yes, I'm in a dilemma now. Which one should I go to first? Or should we split up?" Ma Yujie frowned. "Let's split up. It'll be more efficient that way," Zhuowen said calmly. Ma Yujie glanced at Zhuowen and hesitated. In the end, he pointed at Yao Xiangjuan and said, "We can split up, but this beautiful girl has to come with me." Yao Xiangjuan's pretty face changed slightly. She was very smart, so she naturally knew that Ma Yujie wanted to use her as a hostage to restrict Zhuowen. Ma Yujie was very smart, since one of the 2 directions was the correct one. Then if Zhuowen found the correct one, Zhuowen would be able to monopolize Gong Gong's body without telling him that it was the correct one. Even if Ma Yujie found Gong Gong's body, he would still have to rely on Zhuowen. When the time came, he would have to inform Zhuowen. Therefore, splitting up would only bring Ma Yujie more harm than good. However, Ma Yujie knew that Zhuowen was a loyal and righteous person. If Yao Xiangjuan was in his hands, even if Zhuowen found the real passageway, he would definitely not dare to not inform Ma Yujie. Otherwise, Yao Xiangjuan would be doomed. Sure enough, as soon as Ma Yujie made this suggestion, Zhuowen's face turned ugly. "Brother Ma, don't you trust me?" Zhuowen said coldly. Ma Yujie naturally denied it and said with a smile, "Is there strength in numbers? There are 4 of us here, so it's best to split into 2 groups. When the time comes, whoever finds the correct one only needs to send a message to the other to gather." Zhuowen said coldly, "There's no need to split up. Let's move together. We'll just choose a direction and go directly." Zhuowen knew what Ma Yujie was afraid of, so he flatly refused Ma Yujie's request. "It's best if we can move together." Ma Yujie said with a smile, "Brother Long, let's split up. If we move together, if we choose the wrong direction, we have to go to another place again. It's too much of a waste of time." Yao Xiangjuan suddenly said, "Junior sister Yao, what do you mean?" Zhuowen glanced at Yao Xiangjuan. "I'll be in a group with Brother Ma. We'll split up. Once we find the right direction, we'll immediately send a message to the other party. Yao Xiangjuan said, Haha, junior sister Yao is reasonable and considers the overall situation. Ma Yujie said with a smile, If that's the case, let's split up. Zhuowen no longer hesitated. He refused before because he thought that Yao Xiangjuan was unwilling. Since Yao Xiangjuan was willing to be in a group with Ma Yujie, he naturally had no reason to object. Although Ma Yujie usually looked very unreliable, he was very trustworthy and would not go back on his words. Zhuowen was not worried about Yao Xiangjuan following Ma Yujie. After dividing into groups, the two groups each chose a marker and left the canyon. The two green markers were in completely opposite directions, so the two groups separated as soon as they left the canyon. Zhuowen and Jiang Qixing traveled all the way. They had Ma Yujie's copy of the map in their hands and knew most of the dangerous places in the gear area, so it was very easy for them to travel. Under a red gear, Zhuowen and Jiang Qixing stopped and looked at the red gear floating in the air in confusion. The green marker on the map is here, but it seems that there's only this red gear here. There's nothing else. Jiang Qixing looked around and said. Jiang Qixing said in a deep voice after he looked around and confirmed that there was nothing else. Wait. Zhuowen suddenly said. He came to a void under the red gear and immediately stretched out his right hand. Above his right hand, a powerful space-time force lingered. Zhuowen's right hand directly entered the void. Immediately after, Zhuowen made a grasping motion. Suddenly, the void seemed to reverse and suddenly shattered, revealing a void passage. Chapter 3005. Sha Ruzhuowen's gaze wasn't very good, and he said, This passageway was concealed by someone, and it was even set up from the inside out. In other words, someone entered this passageway before us. Jiang Qixing was startled. Then let's go in quickly. If this is really the entrance to where Gonggong's body is stored, someone else has gotten there before us. Zhuowen nodded. Just as he was about to enter the passage, several streaks of light shot toward them from afar. Zhuowen's gaze fell on the streaks of light and saw that they were 3 human cultivators. However, their eyes were filled with indignation and their expressions were disheveled, as if they were fleeing for their lives. At the same time, Zhuowen also noticed that a dozen streaks of black light were shooting toward them from behind. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. He discovered that the streaks of black light were actually foreign races. These foreign races are chasing us human cultivators. Jiang Qixing also saw this scene and couldn't help but reveal a look of surprise. He was surprised because the human race and the foreign races had reached an agreement. As long as the alliance hadn't been broken, neither side was allowed to attack. Now that these foreign races had joined forces to catch up to the 3 injured human cultivators, Jiang Qixing's anger soared. The 3 human cultivators were 2 men and 1 woman. Suddenly, the older middle-aged man who had fallen behind shouted, Luo Shi Wu Jian, hurry up and leave. I'll help you stall these foreign races. As he spoke, the middle-aged man formed a sword seal with both hands. The divine sword on his back was suddenly unsheathed. Shortly after, it split into sword lights one after another in the void. They were like resplendent stars that shone brightly in the void. Immediately, the middle-aged man's entire body emitted a blazing blood-red light. The sword lights also glowed with blood-red light, and their aura suddenly became much stronger. Senior brother. The remaining young man and woman looked at the middle-aged man who was burning his blood essence with sorrow. Remember, when you leave the door of darkness, tell the house master to avenge us. The middle-aged man muttered, and then, like a moth darting into a flame, he flashed out explosively and collided with the group of xenorace experts. The young man and woman clearly knew that this opportunity was given to them by the middle-aged man with his life. They could not let it go to waste. They activated the flying divine artifact beneath their feet and transformed into a stream of light as they continued to flee. Burning his essence blood, the middle-aged man burst forth with a terrifying amount of power. To think that he would be able to fend off the attacks of dozens of foreign beings single-handedly. However, judging from the middle-aged man's increasingly weak aura, Zhuowen knew that the man wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. "I want to help him." Jiang Qixing could no longer sit still and wanted to fly out, but he was stopped by Zhuowen. "Brother Jiang, it's already too late. This person has already burned his blood essence and is in a state where he won't rest until he's dead. Even if we save him, he won't be able to survive. Moreover, we are quite a distance away from them. By the time you rush over, the battle will have already ended." Zhuowen shook his head. Jiang Qixing fell silent, but his gaze soon landed on the fleeing man and woman. The void around the flying divine artifact that the man and woman were on suddenly distorted, and it was as if time and space had frozen at this moment. The flying artifact beneath the man and woman's feet suddenly came to a halt, and the man and woman's faces were filled with terror and panic. "Hee, do you think you can escape? My little toy." A mocking voice sounded from the void. Above the man and woman, there was a young man in purple robes with his hands clasped behind his back as he looked down at the young man and woman who had been imprisoned by time and space. This purple-robed man's skin was very fair, and there were fine purple scales on both sides of his face. His purple eyes exuded a mysterious light. The power of time and space? This person is the prodigy of the space-time beast race, Sharu. Jiang Qixing's expression became very unsightly the instant he saw the man and woman use the power of time and space to imprison them. Although this Sha Ru wasn't the most powerful prodigy of the space-time beast race, and was even weaker than Moses and the Phoenix people, his cultivation base was still at the late stage of the God of Creation stage, and his battle prowess was probably not weaker than Sauron's. He was a very difficult opponent to deal with. Zhuowen could see that the man and woman were both at the early stage of the God of Creation stage, but because they had suffered heavy injuries, they couldn't unleash their full strength, which was why they were so easily immobilized by Sharu. "It's over." On the flying divine artifact, the young man and woman's eyes were filled with despair. They knew that they were doomed. Even at their peak, they weren't a match for Sharu, let alone now when they weren't even in their peak condition. "You guys keep running." A cruel smile appeared on Sharu's face as he looked down at the immobilized young man and woman, his eyes filled with mockery. "Ah!" Suddenly, a miserable cry sounded from the distance. The young man and woman's expressions changed drastically as they saw the middle-aged man who had burned his blood essence to help them stall the alien race. He had died from exhaustion after being pierced through by an alien race's spear. "Senior brother." The young man and woman wailed, their eyes filled with sorrow. The alien race's entire body was covered in scales. It was most likely a merman, and it held the middle-aged man's corpse in its right hand. The merman cackled, revealing a hint of cruelty. With a twist of its right hand, it was about to crush the middle-aged man's corpse when a streak of bloody light suddenly shot over and entered its body. Splat! The merman screamed and exploded into a cloud of blood mist. The corpse of the middle-aged man who had been pierced by the spear was caught by a figure. Two ants actually dare to interfere? In the distance, Sha Ru's scarlet gaze landed on Zhuowen, who was hovering in the void with a divine bow in his hand. His expression was very unfriendly. He had long since noticed Zhuowen and Jiang Qixing, but Zhuowen's aura was far too weak. He was only an eternal overlord, so he didn't care at all. Jiang Qixing, on the other hand, had attracted his attention. After all, Jiang Qixing's cultivation had improved quite a bit. He was already a mid-stage Genesis overlord, and was even stronger than the young man and woman. Even so, Sharu didn't take him seriously. He was a late-stage god of creation, and he was also from the space-time beast tribe. Killing late-stage god of creation cultivators from the human tribe was a piece of cake for him, let alone a mere mid-stage god of creation cultivator. However, The eternal overlord that he didn't care about was actually holding a divine bow and shooting out a divine arrow that easily killed the merman. Although the merman wasn't very strong, he was still an early-stage Genesis overlord. His physical body was powerful, and he wouldn't be killed so easily. This person's divine arrow could easily tear through the merman's physical defenses. It was truly unbelievable. However, Sha Ru quickly realized that the divine Bao Injua Wen's hand was not ordinary. Whoosh! Chapter 3006. Divine Arrow. Sha Ru sneered. Who do you think you are? Do non-humankind beings need a reason to kill human beings? Just like how you kill ants, do you need a reason? Killing you all depends on my mood. If I'm in a good mood, I'll kill more. If I'm in a bad mood, I'll kill even more. You're just a bunch of pigs and ants. So what if I kill you? Sha Ru's words immediately angered Jiang Qixing and the young man and woman. Zhuowen looked calmly at Sha Ru and said indifferently, Since you think we're ants, do you dare release that man and woman and fight me? Sha Ru was startled, but then he laughed loudly. You're just an eternal overlord trash. You want to challenge me? You think too highly of yourself. And do you think I'm an idiot? Why should I release this man and woman? They're my prey. Their life and death are all in my hands. Zhuowen slowly raised his head and looked at Sha Ru. You're really not going to release them? Sha Ru was a little angry. This eternal overlord trash was actually questioning him. Who gave him such courage? This was the first time he had been questioned by an eternal overlord, and a human at that. This made Sha Ru feel a little humiliated. All of you go. Chop these two humans into mincemeat and torture them as you please. Sha Ru snorted and put his hands behind his back as he coldly ordered the dozen or so outsiders not far away. These dozen or so outsiders were a hodgepodge. Not only were there mermaids, but there were also space-time beasts, black tigers, and other outsiders whose specific characteristics couldn't be discerned. What was even more surprising to Zhuo Yuan was that all of these foreign beings were at the god of creation initial stage. If these foreign beings joined forces, perhaps even a human god of creation final stage cultivator would be no match for them. Jiang Qixing, who was standing beside Zhuowen, was about to attack when he was stopped by Zhuowen. Brother Jiang, guard this fellow Taoist's corpse well. Leave these outsiders to me. Zhuowen said slowly. With a flick of his finger, he pulled out 5 Genesis divine arrows from his spirit ring. Whoosh! 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 Zhuowen knocked 5 divine arrows on the bowstring at the same time. His left foot suddenly stepped forward, and his entire body bent into a half-moon shape. Soon after, he released his right hand, and 5 terrifying sounds of air breaking erupted. 5 divine arrows soared through the sky. Everywhere they passed, space exploded, time warped, and the heavens collapsed. Their might was extremely shocking. In just an instant, the 5 foreign races at the front were pierced by 5 divine arrows and exploded into 5 clouds of blood mist. At the same time, Zhuowen took out another 5 divine arrows, pulled back the bowstring, and released the bowstring. Instantly, the 5 divine arrows shot out, turning into 5 streaks of blood-red light. Another 5 non-humankind beings were turned into blood mists. In just a few breaths of time, 10 non-humankind beings were killed, and the remaining 4 finally terrified. They no longer dashed towards Zhuowen. Although they were already very close to Zhuowen, they didn't dare to approach him. This human was too perverted. He actually shot out 1 divine arrow after another, killing their companions. Was he still human? With a wave of his sleeve, Zhuowen collected the 10 divine arrows that were scattered in the distance. Then he quickly shot out 4 more arrows, and the 4 fleeing non-humankind beings were all killed. This process was simply too short. Jiang Qixing had just settled down the middle-aged man's corpse, and Sha Ru had just finished flexing. He hadn't even recovered from his daze yet, and a dozen or so non-humankind beings had been killed just like that. Although Jiang Qixing knew that Zhuowen was very powerful, he was still stunned by this scene. It was truly inconceivable that he had killed more than a dozen Genesis realm early stage non-humankind beings in just a few breaths of time. Sha Ru was stunned for a moment, and then he flew into a rage. Human, you've got guts. How dare you kill non-humankind beings? Idiot. Why didn't you think about this when you killed my human race? You killed my human race, so I killed your non-humankind. Isn't that right and proper? Zhuan mocked. Sha Ru's eyes flashed. He didn't immediately charge forward to attack Zhuan. Instead, he looked at the divine bow in Zhuan's hand with apprehension. He could sense that this human had been able to kill those non-humankind beings in such a short time mainly because of this strange divine bow. Otherwise, with this human's cultivation, he wouldn't even be able to kill a single non-humankind being. Sha Ru's guess was right. Zhuan was indeed relying on the Ho-E divine bow. After all, his cultivation base was only at the eternal overlord realm. Even if his main body strength was extraordinary, he could at most fight an early-stage Genesis realm expert. Against a dozen non-humankind beings of that level, his main body wouldn't be able to handle it all. Moreover, Zhuan didn't even need to use the Ho-E divine bow to kill these non-humankind beings. He only needed to use ordinary Genesis realm divine arrows to completely annihilate these non-humankind beings. Human, what else can you do apart from relying on the divine bow in your hand? If you have the guts, put away that divine bow and fight me one-on-one. How about that? Sha Ru suddenly said. One-on-one? You really don't have the right to fight me one-on-one. Zhuan sneered. He picked up a Genesis realm divine arrow and pulled the bowstring. Instantly, the divine arrow burst forth with sky-piercing killing intent and shot toward Sha Ru. Sha Ru's pupils shrank to the size of needles when he sensed the terrifying killing intent on the divine arrow. He pushed off with his right foot and burrowed into space-time, not facing the divine arrow at all. He could sense that even if he took the arrow head-on, he would at least be seriously injured. Whoosh! The divine arrow shot out and passed through where Sha Ru had been standing. The terrifying killing intent instantly shattered the space-time shackles that Sha Ru had placed on the young man and woman. Having regained their freedom, the young man and woman hurriedly activated their flying divine artifact and approached Zhuan. They knew that Zhuan intended to help them. So this is your purpose. Don't even think about leaving. Sha Ru's voice became ethereal in the void. Immediately, a palm appeared above the young man's head without anyone noticing and grabbed at the two. However, the moment the palm appeared, a mocking smile appeared on Zhuan's face. He quickly shot out an arrow. The divine arrow was one step ahead of the palm, and in the end it entered the palm. Puchi! The palm exploded into a bloody mist. Soon after, Sha Ru's blood-curdling screams rang out from the void. In space-time, Sha Ru clutched his shattered right palm and his eyes were full of shock and uncertainty. He felt that the humans seemed to have seen through the trajectory of his attack, which was why he had shot the arrow in advance. But how was this possible? Ordinary humans didn't understand the power of space-time at all and naturally couldn't see the trajectory of his space-time power. However, the humans seemed to have seen through it. This was too unbelievable. Sha Ru couldn't believe it. Seeing that the young man and woman were about to approach Zhuan, Sha Ru snorted and attacked again. He subconsciously felt that the human was definitely lucky to have shot him before. This time, the guy wouldn't be so lucky again. Chapter 3007. Sha Ru's death. Sha Ru screamed and immediately used the space-time ability to enter the space-time tunnel. He no longer dared to attack, but looked in horror at the young man with the divine bow not far away. How is this possible? Did this guy see through the trajectory of my space-time travel? Sha Ru trembled all over, clutching his right arm that had exploded. His right arm was almost blown to smithereens and was now recovering very slowly. As one of the top 10 races of the primitive heaven realm, the space-time beast race, his physical recovery ability was very terrifying. If it were any other time, the injury on his right arm would have healed in the blink of an eye, but at this moment the flesh on his right arm was wriggling with difficulty and recovering very slowly. It could be said to be the speed of a turtle. Sha Ru's face was very gloomy. He knew that the slow recovery of his injury must have something to do with the divine arrow shot by the human. The divine arrow was filled with an extremely terrifying killing intent. It was earth-shattering and caused the sun and moon to dim. The moment the divine arrow pierced his right arm, the terrifying killing intent on the surface of the divine arrow penetrated deep into his flesh and blood, hindering his physical recovery. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! Sha Ru was flustered and exasperated. In the space-time tunnel, he stared at Zhuowen, not daring to move rashly. If this human didn't rely on that strange divine arrow, I wouldn't be in such a sorry state. Damn human, damn ant! Sha Ru cursed, but he still didn't dare to go out. He was frightened by Zhuowen's strange archery. At this moment, the young man and woman had already come to Zhuowen and Jiang Qixing's side. After confirming that they were safe, the two of them sighed and hurriedly cupped their fists to Zhuowen in gratitude. Don't say anything first. Let me deal with that cowardly little snake first. Zhuowen waved his hand to stop the young man and woman from saying any words of gratitude. Instead, he glanced at the surrounding void. The young man and woman were startled and hurriedly nodded. Sha Ru was now a great enemy, and they could not let their guard down. Brother, that Sha Ru is a genius of the space-time beast race. He's naturally adept at the power of space-time. His strength might not be as terrifying as the Merman race's Moses or the Phoenix people's Saintus, but his ability to escape is top-notch. If he were to escape, none of us would be able to catch up to him. Perhaps the sand dwarf has already escaped. Unfortunately, Zhuowen didn't pay any attention to her. Instead, he continued to observe the surroundings and spread out his divine sense. Zhuowen had a certain amount of space-time power. Although he couldn't compare to the sand dwarf, he could still see some clues. He knew that the sand dwarf hadn't left. He was hiding in a nearby space-time and watching. Once he relaxed, the sand dwarf would launch a thunderous attack, and they would suffer a calamity. Bang, bang, bang. Suddenly, several attacks swept out from the void. Each attack came from a completely different direction. Zhuowen formed a seal with his right hand and used the light of creation to envelop Jiang Qixing and the others, blocking the sand dwarf's attack in time. This sand dwarf is really insidious. He doesn't dare to face us head-on, but uses underhanded moves. Jiang Qixing looked at the sand dwarf's attack and said angrily. As soon as Jiang Qixing finished speaking, more intensive attacks swept out from the void, all of which were the sand dwarf's underhanded moves. Zhuowen stood in place and formed a seal with both hands to maintain the defense of the light of creation, while his divine sense extended further and further. The surrounding space-time veins were really too complicated. Although Zhuowen's divine sense was many times stronger than that of ordinary cultivators, it was still extremely difficult for him to figure out the surrounding space-time veins. Trying to find the specific location of the sand dwarf in these complicated space-time veins was simply like searching for sand. Fortunately, Zhuowen had mastered the power of space-time. Using the combination of his divine sense and the power of space-time, it wasn't that difficult for him to find the sand dwarf. Bang! 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 The sand dwarf's attacks became fiercer and fiercer. Sometimes, terrifying attacks blasted out from 10 directions at the same time, landing on the light of creation, causing the surface of the light of creation to tremble violently. Jiang Qixing and the others looked at the light of creation that was on the verge of collapse with worry in their eyes. They were afraid that the light of creation would shatter. Bang! 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 After another wave of intensive attacks, the light of creation became slightly dimmer. The light of creation had withstood hundreds of attacks from beginning to end. The sand dwarf was also full of energy. How could he use so many attacks in such a short period of time? Did he not feel tired? Jiang Qixing's eyes were full of worry. He couldn't help but look at Zhuowen, who had his eyes closed and seemed to be calculating something. He said softly, "Brother Zhua, we can't continue like this. We'll be exhausted to death." As soon as Jiang Qixing finished speaking, a shattering sound came from the creation mysterious light, and it immediately shattered into countless fine powder. The young man and woman cried out in alarm, their eyes filled with horror. Even Jiang Qixing showed a look of fear. At this moment, Zhuowen had already opened his eyes. He swiftly withdrew an arrow and suddenly pulled the bowstring to a full moon. After that, the arrow shot out with a swish, flying through the air and charging into the depths of space. At this moment, the sand dwarf narrowed his eyes in a space-time tunnel deep in space. When he saw the light of creation shatter in the end, he threw his head back and laughed loudly. His eyes were cruel. "Human, it's time to end you. Hee hee." The sand dwarf snickered. He suddenly struck out with his right hand, instantly launching several attacks. The attacks passed through the space-time tunnel and shot out in several directions. However, as soon as the attacks shot out, Zhuowen had already shot out an arrow. The divine arrow shot through the air and accurately passed through the attacks, obliterating them completely. After obliterating the attacks, the arrow's momentum did not decrease. It continued to rush into the void and into countless space-time tunnels before finally arriving at the space-time tunnel where the sand dwarf was. The sand dwarf's pupils shrank. He hurriedly retreated. At the same time, he took out ink-black crystals from his spirit ring. The moment these ink-black crystals were thrown out, they actually exploded one after another. The explosive energy that spread out was extremely terrifying and frightening. After Sanddwarf threw out nearly 100 ink-black crystals, the arrow was finally blocked. Moreover, the arrow fell and dimmed. Seeing that the arrow was blocked and destroyed, the Sand Dwarf breathed a sigh of relief. He was really frightened by the arrow that carried terrifying killing intent. The arrow was only a Genesis divine weapon. He did not care. What he was most afraid of was the killing intent on the arrow. The terror of the killing intent far exceeded the grade of the arrow itself. If he was hit by the arrow, the killing intent would invade his body and he would definitely die. The moment the Sand Dwarf breathed a sigh of relief, his expression changed drastically. This was because he felt an even more terrifying killing intent locking onto him. Chapter 3008. Luo Shi and Wu Jianpuqi. Sha Ru only had the time to turn around before his entire body flew backwards. An arrow had completely penetrated his chest. Horrifying fresh blood spurted out, causing Sha Ru to involuntarily cry out in pain. He could clearly feel that his flesh and blood had been pulverized by the killing intent, and even his spirit was deeply affected. Sha Ru was terrified. He desperately urged the energy in his body to resist the terrifying killing intent. Unfortunately, all his efforts were in vain. In the end, he screamed and exploded into a cloud of blood mist, transforming into a huge body. Sha Ru was a space-time beast. His body was a huge divine snake that lay across the space-time tunnel. Zhuowen stood in the void. After he shot the second arrow, he knew that Sha Ru was doomed. He instructed Jiang Qixing, then operated the space-time force and disappeared into the space-time tunnel in the depths of the void. Jiang Qixing and the other two looked at each other, wondering why Zhuowen had left. Sha Ru's attack seems to have stopped. Could it be that fellow Taoist's arrow killed Sha Ru? The young female cultivator asked cautiously. It should be. Jiang Qixing nodded. The young man and woman looked at each other in shock. They knew how terrifying Sha Ru was, and in the situation just now, Sha Ru had directly escaped into the space-time tunnel. It was basically impossible to capture Sha Ru's location. If it were them, even if they used their divine sense for a lifetime, they would not be able to find Sha Ru's specific location. But the scarred young man only spent about a quarter of an hour to find Sha Ru's location and accurately shot 2 arrows to kill Sha Ru. Maybe Sha Ru was injured and fled far away. The young male cultivator still could not accept this fact and said hesitantly. However, as soon as he finished speaking, he immediately shut his mouth. This was because he saw a huge corpse of a divine snake being thrown out from the depths of the void ahead. Zhuo Wen was following closely behind the corpse of the divine snake. This is the body of a space-time beast. It seems to be Sha Ru's corpse. He really killed the Sandru. The young female cultivator covered her cherry lips and said, I heard that space-time beasts are born with the ability to use space-time energy. This is because when space-time beasts are born, they will produce a crystal called space-time crystal. Brother Zhuo, I see that you have also mastered the power of space-time. The space-time crystal should be of some use to you. Jiang Qixing transmitted his voice to Zhuo Wen. Zhuo Wen was startled and immediately stopped on Sha Ru's corpse. His divine sense began to sweep over Sha Ru's corpse inch by inch. Soon he found a sparkling and translucent crystal at 7 inches of Sha Ru's corpse. He knew that this crystal should be the space-time crystal that Jiang Qixing had mentioned. Zhuo Wen arrived at Sha Ru's 7 inches away. Using his right hand as a blade, he sliced across Sha Ru's abdomen. Then his hand reached inside and grabbed a crystal that was flickering with black light. He could feel the powerful space-time energy contained within the crystal. What a rich space-time energy! No wonder the space-time beasts can master the power of space-time at birth. They don't even need to comprehend it. It's all because of the space-time crystal. Zhuo Wen looked at the space-time crystal for a while and began to try to absorb it. He was surprised to find that the space-time energy in the space-time crystal could be easily absorbed into his body and spread to his 8 extraordinary meridians. Zhuo Wen's eyes lit up, and he began to use the devouring power to quickly devour the space-time energy in the space-time crystal. Half a day later, the space-time crystal in Zhuo Wen's hand completely shattered, and the space-time energy in it was completely absorbed by Zhuo Wen. Zhuo Wen slowly opened his eyes, which were filled with enlightenment. After absorbing this space-time crystal, his understanding of space-time energy had deepened, and he was much more proficient in using it than before. If he used the space-time energy again, his body movement would be more agile than before, and he would be able to shuttle through the space-time tunnel like a fish in water. Not only that, if he used his self-created divine ability, the Destiny Space-Time Kill, its power would be even more terrifying and incomparable to before. Zhuo Wen did not use the Destiny Space-Time Kill to test its power. This divine ability was also his trump card, and he did not want to expose it in front of Jiang Qixing and the others. Although the current power of this divine ability might not be as strong as the Ho-I Divine Bow and the Yama Ghost Portrait. However, Zhuo Wen knew that this was something he had created himself, and it had limitless potential. As he grew stronger, his understanding of fate and space-time would become more thorough, and the power of the fate space-time annihilation would naturally become even more terrifying. Brother Jiang, when I absorbed the space-time crystal just now, I gained some enlightenment. I've kept him waiting for a long time. Zhuo Wen smiled apologetically at Jiang Qixing. Jiang Qixing waved his hand and said, Brother Long, you're too polite. It's only half a day. Compared to you saving our lives, it's nothing. Luo Shi and Wu Jian greet Brother Long. Thank you for your help this time. Otherwise, we might have been buried in the hands of the foreign races. The young man and woman hurriedly came in front of Zhuo Wen and respectfully bowed. Zhuo Wen nodded. Although he did not mention his name to the two, Jiang Qixing should have mentioned it to them when he was absorbing the space-time crystal. Therefore, he was not surprised that the two knew his name. May I know which sect you two are from? Zhuo Wen asked. They are from the Scarlet Heaven Sword Tower, Jiang Qixing replied. Scarlet Heaven Sword Tower? Zhuo Wen was startled and immediately nodded without saying anything. Zhuo Wen was very unfamiliar with the Scarlet Heaven Sword Tower. The only impression he had was that he had met the Scarlet Heaven Sword Tower's Tower Master, Xiang Puyu, in front of the Gate of Darkness. Previously, when he fought against MDA, Xiang Puyu was also a witness like Sun Qin. Zhuowen's impression of him was neither good nor bad. Speaking of which, the Scarlet Heaven Sword Tower was the strongest Dao Palace force in the Western Dao domain. Zhuowen knew that the strongest genius of the Scarlet Heaven Sword Tower was called Situ Liangji. His strength was not bad. Zhuowen had seen Situ Liangji on the Universal Contribution ranking. He was ranked 4th, only below Yi Hanfei. Although the middle-aged man who saved Luo Shi and Wu Jian's cultivation was not bad, he was only a mid-stage Genesis Lord. He should not be Situ Liangji. Right, the strongest genius of your Scarlet Heaven Sword Tower should be Situ Liangji, right? I remember that he also entered the Gate of Darkness. Why didn't he go with you? Zhuowen asked casually. Luo Shi and Wu Jian smiled bitterly and said, Senior brother Situ, senior sister Zhongli, and senior brother Yi Qidong joined hands to explore the way out of this place. They separated from us long ago. After we parted ways with senior brother Situ, we went to look for our fellow disciples of the Scarlet Heaven Sword Tower. We wanted to gather our fellow disciples. But on the way, we discovered that the foreign races were wantonly chasing after our human race. We also fought with the foreign races. After killing some of them, we encountered the sand race and were chased by them all the way here. Chapter 3009. A shameless alien race. These outsiders are really arrogant. Oh right, is this Sha Ru the one who initiated this hunt? Asked Zhuowen coldly. Luo Shi shook his head and said, Not Sha Ru, but Moses of the Mermaid clan. Sha Ru is just an accomplice. Apart from Sha Ru, Moses has also joined forces with Hu Ben of the Black Tiger clan and Lung Bai of the Dragon clan. He has gathered almost all the other races and divided them into several teams to hunt down the humans who enter the gear zone. Speaking up to that point, Luo Shi was so angry that her petite body was trembling, obviously infuriated by Moses' actions. This Moses is really bold. He actually has bad intentions. As soon as he entered this place, he joined forces with the other races to kill us humans. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes, and a murderous look flashed across his eyes. He continued, So the Saint of the Phoenix people has also joined. No, the Saintess of the Phoenix people was focused on Ancestor Gonggong. She didn't pay any attention to us humans at all. I don't think it has anything to do with the Saintess of the Phoenix people. However, we can't completely rule out the suspicion. After all, Moses and the Saintess of the Phoenix people are very close. Maybe the Saintess had something to do with it, Wu Jian said. Then do you know how many squads there are? If it's possible, I don't mind wiping them all out. Zhuowen said coldly. Originally, Zhuowen didn't want to meddle in other people's business. However, these foreign races had gone too far. How dare they betray the human race? Zhuowen couldn't take this lying down. Although he wanted to go to where Gonggong's body was, he was not in a hurry. His main goal in entering the Door of Darkness was Gonggong's goo worms. He had already obtained the Gonggong goo worm. His mission was considered complete. Moreover, if he wanted to get the essence blood of the ancestor sorcerer, he would have to rely on the Pangu's sacred body. Right now, the clone was concentrating on fusing with Gonggong's goo worms in the Great World. There was still some time before the fusion was complete. In other words, if the clone had not broken through, even if Zhuowen came to Gonggong's body, it would not be easy to extract his essence blood. He might as well make use of this time to get rid of these treacherous foreign races. By then, his clone might have completely fused with the Gonggong goo worm. By then, he would be much more confident. There are a total of 3 teams, and the 3 teams are led by Sha Ru, Hu Ben, and Lung Bai respectively. Among them, the strongest team should be Hu Ben's team. Not only are their overall standards high, that Hu Ben's power is even stronger than Sha Ru's, second only to Moses. Luo, she said in a deep voice, Sha Ru has been annihilated by us. His team has also been annihilated. In other words, there are only 2 teams left. And didn't Moses lead a team? Zhuowen asked doubtfully. Although Moses was the instigator, he did not really take part in it. He was just following the sacred lady of the Phoenix people to search for an exit to leave this place. Luo, she continued to say, do you know the locations of the other two teams? Zhuowen looked at Luo Shi and asked. Luo Shi revealed a look of excitement and quickly said, I know. The foreign race team is especially arrogant. They did not hide their tracks at all. As long as they encounter human, they will immediately attack and destroy them. After that, they will take all the valuables from the human cultivators. And now, most of the human cultivators have joined forces and contacted each other through the communication Jade Talisman to determine the location of the foreign race team so that they can move and hide in advance. Zhuowen shook his head inwardly. These humans were too cowardly. They were actually hiding from the foreign race team. Did they not intend to join forces to fight against the foreign race team? Luo, she saw the meaning in Zhuowen's expression and said in a deep voice, the overall standard of the human race is much lower than the foreign race. In addition, some people have an innate fear of the foreign race. Although there were a few people who wanted to join forces to fight against the foreign race, there were not many people who responded. Zhuowen nodded and did not delve into the details. Instead, he said to Luo Shi, Junior sister Luo Shi, please contact the others and provide us with the location of Lung Bai's team. We will take care of Lung Bai's team first. Luo Shi quickly nodded and took out the communication Jade Talisman to start contacting the others. Soon there was a reply. Luo Shi looked at it and told Zhuowen the specific location of Lung Bai's team. It's not far from here. Let's go and meet Lung Bai. Zhuowen looked around and the corners of his mouth curled up in a smile. He took the lead and flew in the direction of Lung Bai. Under a green gear, there was an area of mountains. On one of the mountain peaks, a man was carefully observing a group of foreign race members who were patrolling around in the distance. At the same time, he used the communication Jade Talisman to send a message. After doing this, he immediately entered an inconspicuous cave not far away. There was another person in the cave. It was a graceful woman with good looks. If Zhuowen was here, he would definitely recognize that this woman was Xingjing, who he had just parted with not long ago. As for the man sneaking back into the cave, he was Su Qinshin. Brother Su, what did you go out to do just now? Xingjing asked curiously. Junior sister Luo Shi of the Scarlet Heaven Sword Tower sent a message to the group and provided her with the specific location of Lung Bai's team. Isn't Lung Bai near here? So I sent the location to junior sister Luo Shi. Su Qinshin said. Why does he want the location of Lung Bai's team? Is he planning to find us? Xingjing frowned and shook her head. She felt that the message sent by Luo Shi was a little strange. I'm not sure either. Since junior sister Luo Shi wants it, I will naturally help if I can. Su Qinshin said with a smile. Xingjing nodded and said unhappily, I thought we would be able to find our fellow disciples. I didn't expect that most of our fellow disciples would be killed by the foreign races. These foreign races are really despicable. They actually went back on their word and attacked our human race at this time. Su Qinshin smiled bitterly and said, the foreign races can't be trusted, but I didn't expect them to be shameless to this extent. AI, if we hadn't parted ways with Long Wen and followed him, perhaps we wouldn't have to hide in this cave like this? Xingjing fell silent. Ever since Zhuowen had easily destroyed the red-eyed bats in the canyon, they had looked at Zhuowen in a new light and knew that Zhuowen was much stronger than them. Following such a powerhouse was indeed the best choice for them. Unfortunately, they had already parted ways with Zhuowen and were now trapped here, not daring to go out. Even if they wanted to hug his leg, they couldn't. There are fluctuations of battle. It's very strong and is close to us. Could it be that Lung Bai's team is fighting with someone? Chapter 30:10. Lung Bai Xingjing also stood up, her beautiful eyes looking at Su Qinshin with a serious look, her eyes filled with confusion. During this period of time, The foreign races had been very strong. The human race had been suppressed and forced to hide. After all, the top geniuses of the human race were busy exploring the place where Gong Gong's body was stored and did not pay attention to the foreign races suppressing the human race. It could be said that the human race lacked a true leader to lead the human race against the foreign races. In Xing Jing's opinion, Lung Bai's team had been loitering around here for some time. Whenever a human appeared, Lung Bai's team would kill them with lightning speed. Moreover, Lung Bai seemed to know that there were many humans hiding here. He did not leave at all. Instead, he carried out a thorough search. During this period of time, he found many humans hiding here and killed all of them. Xing Jing and Su Qinshin had been avoiding Lung Bai's search and had been in a state of fear all this time. In their opinion, Lung Bai's team was too terrifying. Even if the two of them joined forces, they were far from being a match. If they were found by Lung Bai's team, they would not even have a chance to escape. Now that they had sensed powerful battle fluctuations, they quickly thought of Lung Bai's team. Moreover, the battle fluctuations were far stronger than before. Could it be that Lung Bai's team had encountered a powerful opponent? Junior Xingjing, you sent Junior Luo to the specific location of Lung Bai's team, right? Su Qinshin asked. Xingjing nodded, then thought of something and said, "Could it be that Junior Luo Shi and the others are fighting against Lung Bai's team?" Su Qinshin shook his head and said, "If Junior Luo Shi was with Sita Liangji, she would have the strength to fight against Lung Bai's team. But as far as I know, Sita Liangji should be with Zhongli, Haoyan, and Yi Qidong. It is unlikely that he would turn back to look for Junior Luo Shi. Then who could it be? To be able to cause such a huge fluctuation, it must be a difficult opponent for Lung Bai's team to deal with. Let's go take a look." Su Qinshin's eyes flashed, a little tempted to go take a look. Xing Jing revealed a hesitant expression. Her beautiful eyes flickered as she said in a low voice, "Senior Brother Su, you know better than me how strong the Cold Defeat team is. If we go out, there will be a huge risk of being exposed. Let's be careful. I can feel that the battle over there is becoming more and more terrifying. I think that Lung Bai will not notice us." Su Qinshin's eyes shone brightly, but he was determined to go out and take a look. Xing Jing was helpless and could only say, "Then let's try our best to be careful. Don't get too close to that battle." Next, Su Qinshin and Xing Jing tiptoed out of their hiding place. Thousands of miles away from where they were hiding, there was a rather remote valley. At this moment, Lung Bai's expression was ugly as he watched the members of his team die one by one. Right now, Lung Bai was in the form of a human. However, his cheeks were filled with golden dragon scales. At the same time, there was a gigantic dragon tail growing out from his back. Originally, Lung Bai was leading a group of cultivators to patrol the area and search for humans hiding in this area. His harvest was quite good. He found quite a few humans hiding in this area. Naturally, he cruelly killed them all. Just now, he happened to find a few humans hiding in a very inconspicuous cave. Just as he ordered a few of his subordinates to capture them, a divine arrow pierced through their bodies and exploded into clouds of blood. Following that, another 2 divine arrows shot out of the void. The 3 divine arrows intertwined together, transforming into a cloud-like astral wind that shot into the ranks of the outsiders and began a massacre. The divine arrows were simply too sharp. The moment the outsiders in the group came into contact with them, they were pierced through without being able to resist at all. They couldn't be more dead. Seeing the number of outsiders in the group dwindling, Lung Bai knew that he couldn't just sit idly by and watch. He had to stop these divine arrows. At the same time, Lung Bai was very wary of the person shooting the arrows in the dark. A cultivator who could shoot such divine arrows had to be someone with terrifying strength. Roar! Lung Bai let out a long roar. His human form instantly exploded and turned into a huge dragon that seemed to be able to crush the entire sky. This giant dragon was covered in golden scales that emitted a terrifying golden light. especially its pair of sharp golden eyes that were filled with a terrifying chill. Lung Bai was a golden dragon of the dragon tribe. His bloodline was much more superior than the average dragon. His talent was also extremely powerful. Lung Bai's cold gaze focused on the divine arrows that were wreaking havoc in the group. The golden dragon scales on his body emitted a blinding golden light. Then, the golden light seemed to have materialized and left the dragon scales. It whizzed out and turned into a golden rain. The golden rain seemed to have a mind of its own. It avoided the outsiders and landed on the 3 divine arrows that were wreaking havoc. Bang! 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 The sound of rain hitting banana leaves could be heard. Under the bombardment of the golden rain, the divine arrows actually started to waver. Their forward momentum also slowed down. The outsiders who were being ravaged by the divine arrows heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly retreated behind Lung Bai. Lung Bai looked at the few outsiders who had retreated behind him. His expression was very ugly. There were more than 50 outsiders in the group that he was leading. Now, there were only a dozen or so gathered behind him. Moreover, all of them were severely injured. Lung Bai knew that if he had taken action a step later, the dozen or so outsiders would have been buried by the raging divine arrows. "Who is it? Get the hell out here." Lung Bai's expression was gloomy. He shouted into the void. His voice was as loud as a bell, echoing continuously. Xing Jing and Su Qin, who had been secretly observing from their hiding places, were instantly shocked by this loud shout. Xing Jing actually lost his balance and accidentally bumped into a small rock beside his feet. The small rock fell from the cliff and made a soft sound. Although the sound was not loud, Lung Bai was not an ordinary person. He immediately noticed the sound from Xing Jing's side. "It's over." Xing Jing and Su Qin's faces were pale. When they saw Lung Bai's attention land on them, they were so scared that their bodies trembled. "Looks like the cat's out of the bag. Die." Lung Bai sneered coldly. He swung his massive dragon tail and shot out like a fish in water. His speed was as fast as lightning. Xing Jing and Su Qin could not be bothered with anything else when they saw Lung Bai rushing toward them. They summoned their flying divine tools and transformed into 2 streaks of light that quickly fled. They're actually 2 early-stage God of Creation ants. Chapter 30:11. Appear, however, Lung Bai would not let the 2 of them off just because of that. After all, they had split into 3 teams, and their goal was to exterminate the human race. These 2 were humans, and he naturally had no reason to spare them. Boom! A huge dragon claw swept out from the void and caught up with Xing Jing and Su Qin in the blink of an eye. In front of this huge dragon claw, Xing Jing and Su Qin were as tiny as ants. In particular, the terrifying aura emitted from the dragon claw was like a heavy object pressing down on their bodies, causing them to feel suffocated and even affected their movements. "It's over." Feeling the pressure coming closer and closer, Xing Jing and Su Qin's heart sank. They were very anxious and knew that if they were hit by the dragon claw, they would be severely injured at the very least and die at the very worst. Just as the hearts of the 2 people were filled with despair, the incomparably huge dragon claw exploded into a cluster of bloody mist with a poochy sound. Lung Bai let out a miserable cry and hurriedly withdrew his right claw. His serene, cold gaze was filled with fear as he looked towards another empty space. In the depths of the void, a figure stood in the air, holding a bow in his left hand and an arrow in his right, like a peerless god of war. And that figure was naturally Zhuo himself. Behind Zhuo, the 3 people standing were naturally Jiang Qisheng, Luo Shi, and Wu Jian. "Senior Su, Senior Xingjing, are you all right?" Luo Shi hurried to Su Qin and Xingjing's side and asked with concern, "Junior Luo Shi, why are you with Longwen?" Xingjing's beautiful eyes first glanced at Zhuo before she came back to her senses and asked Luo Shi, "Actually, it's like this." Luo Shi gave a brief account of how they met Zhuo and Xingjing showed a look of understanding. At the same time, she finally understood why Luo Shi had asked her for Lung Bai's exact location. It seemed that the person he really wanted was Longwen. "Brother Long, I've been saved by you again. I'm afraid I won't be able to repay this debt of gratitude in the future." Void Servant Shin looked at Zhuowen with a wry smile. "The two of you don't have to take it to heart. The foreign races have betrayed us and dared to massacre us humans in the Door of Darkness. I, Longwen, am a member of the human race after all. Naturally, I can't let such a thing happen." Zhuowen waved his hand and continued, "You guys hide behind me first. Leave this Lung Bai to me." "No need. You're fighting alone while the rest of us are hiding behind you." "How can this be?" "I know that, Brother Long. Your strength far surpasses any one of us. Although we can't deal with Lung Bai, leave those small fries around Lung Bai to us." Xing Jing hurriedly said, "Junior sister Xing Jing is right. You can't shoulder all the enemies by yourself. We'll help you share some of the burden." Jiang Qisheng also stood up. Luo Shi, Wu Jian, and Su Qinshin nodded in agreement. "All right, leave this dragon to me. I'll leave those guys to you. Now kill them for me. I will restrain that dragon from behind. But you still have to be careful." Zhuowen said in a low voice. Jiang Qixing and the others nodded and rushed toward the dozen or so foreign races behind Lung Bai. Although these foreign races were strong, they had been injured by the divine arrow earlier, and their strength had decreased greatly. Zhuowen knew that with Jiang Qisheng and the other strength, it would not be difficult to get rid of these foreign races. "A bunch of ants! How dare you be arrogant in front of me?" Exasperated, Lung Bai let out a loud roar and slammed out a gigantic dragon claw once again, landing directly on top of Jiang Qixing and the others. It pressed down fiercely, wanting to crush Jiang Qixing and the others to dust. Jiang Qisheng and the others sucked in a breath of cold air, but soon they breathed a sigh of relief because a divine arrow had shot out from the void and landed accurately on the dragon claw, instantly turning it into powder. Lung Bai roared to the sky in pain and looked at Zhuowen in the distance. He was furious, but at the same time, a deep sense of fear appeared in the depths of his eyes. Although this human ant in front of him was only an eternal overlord, the divine bow and divine arrow in his hands were not ordinary. They could easily shatter his body and completely disintegrate his attack. Although he was a golden dragon with an extremely strong body and astonishing recovery ability, his dragon claws had been pierced through many times. It would take a lot of his essence to recover, and the side effects on his body were not small. "We have to destroy this human first." Lung Bai realized the threat this person posed. He knew that if he allowed this person to continue shooting arrows, he would not have any room to retaliate. When he thought of this, Lung Bai's body rushed out like lightning. He rushed towards Zhuowen, who was in the empty space a short distance away. That huge golden dragon body was just like an incomparably huge sun. It was so hot that no one dared to look at it. Jiang Qixing and the others were already engaged in a fierce battle with a dozen or so foreign races, and the battle fluctuations were quite vast and terrifying. Although Jiang Qixing's side had fewer people than the foreign races, they had an overwhelming advantage. The foreign races were almost completely suppressed by Jiang Qixing and the others, and they did not have much strength to fight back. Judging from the situation, it was only a matter of time before these foreign races were destroyed by Jiang Qixing and the others. Lung Bai had obviously thought of this as well, so he did not delay and arrived in front of Zhuowen in an instant. He opened his bloody mouth and spat out a huge and terrifying ball of golden light. The golden ball shot out at an extremely fast speed, bringing with it boundless radiance. It carried with it an astonishing might as it fell towards Zhuowen. Zhuowen's eyes were solemn as he stared at the huge golden ball. He thought of something and said in a low voice, "Could this be a dragon ball?" Zhuowen had heard of dragon balls and knew that they were the source of the dragon's power and the most important thing. It was said that Dragon Balls were one of the hardest things in the world, and it was very difficult to destroy them. And the power of the Dragon Pearl was even more earth-shattering. Generally, when the Dragon Race took out the Dragon Pearl to fight, it meant that the Dragon Race's battle had reached the point of life and death. The Dragon Pearl was the Dragon Race's final trump card, and also their most powerful trump card. Zhuowen did not dare to be careless. He took out another Genesis Grade Divine Arrow and pulled the bowstring to a full moon. Terrifying killing intent filled the surrounding void. With a whoosh, the divine arrow shot out and slammed into the Dragon Ball with shocking killing intent. Ding! A crisp sound filled the air. The power of the divine arrow penetrated the heavens and the earth, and it slowed down the falling of the Dragon Pearl by quite a bit. However, it was only a delay. Zhuo Wan was shocked to discover that the divine arrow made a crisp cracking sound. The divine arrow was actually broken, and the Dragon Ball continued to fly towards him. Chapter 30:12. Mie Lungzhuowen's eyes flashed. Although Lung Bai was stronger than Sharu, he wasn't that much stronger. If it weren't for this Dragon Ball, Zhuowen could have killed Lung Bai with an ordinary Genesis divine arrow. However, it was a pity that Lung Bai was an extraordinary being. To think that he would be able to nurture such a terrifying Dragon Pearl within his body. Even a god of creation's stage divine arrow was unable to do anything to it. Haha, human, you're dead meat. Do you really think that you are invincible just because you have that strange divine bow? What a fool's dream. Lung Bai naturally saw the divine arrow that was crushed by the Dragon Ball and couldn't help but laugh heartily. Lung Bai knew that the divine arrow that this human relied on was no longer effective against his Dragon Balls. This meant that this human was dead meat. I won't kill you immediately. I will slowly torture you to death. You actually force me to use a trump card like the Dragon Balls. Lung Bai's eyes were cold as he glared at Zhuowen, revealing a cruel expression. Although the Dragon Balls were powerful, releasing them was a very dangerous thing. At the same time, it consumed a lot of his energy, and there were also great side effects. This kind of method was usually used when the Dragon Race was in a life and death crisis. Lung Bai released the Dragon Ball to attack Zhuowen as soon as he came up. Clearly, he valued Zhuowen very much and knew that only this kind of method could suppress this person. Zhuowen stood in place. His eyes were calm, as if he didn't care about the approaching Dragon Ball. Pretending to be calm? Haha, let's see how long you can pretend. Lung Bai sneered. Looking at Zhuowen's calm eyes, he was actually very angry. He hated the calm expression of this human youth in front of him. If he remembered correctly, this young man had always had this kind of calm expression since he appeared, as if there was nothing that could change his expression. Zhuowen completely ignored Lung Bai's sarcasm. Instead, he slowly pulled out a blood-stained horn from the large world. This blood-stained horn did not have any special aura. It was very ordinary, just like an ordinary object. However, the moment Zhuowen placed the blood-stained horn on the divine bow, a murderous intent that could pierce through the will of the heavens fiercely surged out. It was like a huge wave that was taller than the previous one, as if it wanted to drown everything, filling the space between heaven and earth. The moment Lung Bai felt the murderous intent, his pupils shrank to the size of needles, revealing a look of disbelief. This murderous intent was much more terrifying than any of the previous times. The moment he came into contact with this murderous intent, all the hair on his body stood on end, his muscles tightened, and his breathing stagnated. This suffocating feeling made him very uncomfortable, and his heart was very uneasy. The divine arrow that this person took out is very different from the divine arrows from before. Lung Bai frowned and muttered to himself. Although he felt that the blood-stained horn was not ordinary, he was more confident in his Dragon Balls. He was very confident that in this starry sky, there were very few treasures that could shatter his Dragon Balls, unless it was an expert who was much stronger than him, such as a supreme expert at the level of a master of heaven. Of course, the Dragon Balls in his body would become stronger as his strength increased. If he could also become a master of heaven in the future, then his Dragon Balls would naturally be even more terrifying. Ordinary masters of heaven would not be able to shatter them. It was a pity that his cultivation had not reached such a terrifying level yet. Boom! Zhuo pulled the bowstring to a full moon and then released it. The bowstring actually let out a terrifying sound like a thunderstorm, and the surrounding void was accompanied by an extremely ear-piercing sound of tearing cloth. The murderous intent, which was already terrifying, seemed to have solidified at this moment. The surrounding void seemed to have solidified and was completely affected by this murderous intent. Ding! Ho Yi's divine arrow, which carried a monstrous murderous intent, finally landed on the Dragon Balls and immediately let out a crisp sound. That sound only rang once before it fell silent. However, very soon, the sound underwent an incredible transformation from a ding to a ka. Then, Lung Bai spat out a mouthful of blood. His huge dragon body strangely rolled and struggled in the void. His huge lantern-sized eyes stared fixedly at the rising Dragon Balls in front of him. Countless cracks appeared on the surface of the Dragon Balls. These cracks looked like patterns, and there were many of them densely packed together. Shattered, shattered? How is this possible? How could my Dragon Balls shatter? Lung Bai let out a heart-wrenching scream. Although his body was permanently damaged due to the shattering of the Dragon Pearl, and intense pain filled his entire body, Lung Bai still couldn't move. However, the intense despair caused by the shattering of the Dragon Balls covered all of his senses. He knew that the shattering of the Dragon Balls meant that he would be crippled in the future. He would never be able to cultivate again. Bang! The Dragon Balls emitted an extremely dazzling light. Then, the moment the cracks spread to the extreme, they shattered into countless golden powder and scattered in the air. Pucci! Lung Bai spat out a mouthful of blood. His dragon body stopped struggling. Instead, he floated in the void, motionless. Only his rapid breathing indicated that he was still alive. Zhuo slowly walked to Lung Bai's side. Looking at Lung Bai's unwilling eyes and his fading life force, he knew that Lung Bai wouldn't live for much longer. I can't accept this. I actually died at the hands of an eternal overlord human? Human, if it weren't for the divine bow and arrow in your hands, you would be nothing more than an ant in my eyes. I could kill you with one claw, Lung Bai said viciously. The winner takes all. The winner takes all. Isn't this the law of nature? A loss is a loss. Why do you have to talk so much nonsense? Zhuo said indifferently. Lung Bai spat out a mouthful of blood and said coldly, Human, don't be too happy. You killed one of my race. We won't let you go. There are 2 other teams similar to mine. Sha Ru and Hu Ben will definitely avenge me. If Moses and the Saintess of the Phoenix people find out, they won't let you go either. Zhuowen's lips curled into a mocking smile. Sha Ru? I'm really sorry, but Sha Ru has already gone to the underworld before you. You should be able to go down and meet up with him soon. After he finished speaking, Zhuo didn't waste any more words. His right palm suddenly landed between Lung Bai's eyebrows. A powerful force poured out and transformed into a terrifying storm vortex that invaded Lung Bai's soul and annihilated it. Lung Bai slowly closed his eyes, filled with shock, resentment, and resentment. Not long after Zhuo finished off Lung Bai, Jiang Qixing and the others' battle also ended. After dealing with the battlefield, Jiang Qixing and the others rushed to Zhuowen's side. When they saw the fallen Lung Bai at Zhuowen's feet, their eyes revealed a trace of shock. As expected of Brother Long, you're still so strong. Xing Jing's beautiful eyes looked deeply at Zhuo. She was completely convinced. It wasn't just Xing Jing. Jiang Qixing, Xu Qinshin, and the others also revealed looks of reverence. Every powerhouse was worthy of respect. Furthermore, this powerhouse had saved their lives, so they naturally respected him even more. I was just lucky. Zhuo smiled faintly, but his gaze fell on the western sky and slowly narrowed. Chapter 30:13. Hu Benjuan's eyes slowly narrowed as a dignified look flashed across his face. In his perception, there was a vast aura rushing towards him at high speed. This aura was even stronger than Lung Bai's. Moreover, Zhuo was certain that the source of this aura must be a foreign race. It was impossible for a human to emit such a violent aura. Zhuo's actions naturally attracted the attention of Jiang Qixing and the others. They followed Zhuo's gaze and looked into the distance, only to find that there was nothing there at all. Although their cultivations were stronger than Zhuo's, their divine senses were much weaker than Zhuo's, and the range they could explore was much smaller than Zhuo's. Therefore, the enemies that Zhuo could detect in advance were beyond the reach of their divine senses, which was why they were puzzled. Brother Long, what's wrong? Why do you look so serious? Jiang Qixing asked doubtfully. Zhuo said in a deep voice, I sense a powerful aura rapidly approaching here. If I'm not mistaken, this aura should be the last foreign race team, the team led by Hu Ben from the Black Tiger clan. Jiang Qixing and the others were stunned. Although Zhuo's strength was indeed very strong, it wasn't to the extent that his perception was stronger than theirs, right? They had repeatedly used their divine senses to investigate, but there was nothing strange in the direction Zhuo was looking. There was not even a shadow of a foreign race. You guys hide first. Hu Ben's target is very clear. He's here. I'm afraid that after Lung Bai was killed, he secretly sent this message to Hu Ben. That's why Hu Ben rushed over so quickly, Zhuo said in a deep voice. Jiang Qixing and the others hesitated for a moment, but in the end they nodded and found a rather secluded cave in a nearby mountain range. The few of them hid in the cave and spread out their divine senses to observe the surrounding environment and situation. Soon, they were surprised to find that a streak of light was really flying towards them from the distant void. The streak of light was extremely fast, and it didn't take long for it to fall into the valley where Zhuo was. The flowing light stopped above the valley. The brilliance on its surface faded away, revealing a team. This was a group of non-human beings, led by a tiger-headed non-human being. The tiger-headed man's aura was very vast. Just by standing there, the aura that lingered around his body swept out like a violent hurricane. The surrounding void seemed to be unable to withstand the tiger-headed man's aura and began to distort and shatter. All of the foreign beings in the group were looking at this tiger-headed being with reverence and fear. Hu Ben looked around and saw the many corpses of the outsiders scattered around the valley. His eyes narrowed, looking very unfriendly. In the end, Hu Ben's gaze landed on Lung Bai's huge dragon body, not far away. His eyes immediately burned with rage. Human, tell me who killed Lung Bai and the others, and I will leave your corpse intact. Hu Ben finally turned his gaze to Zhuo not far away. His voice was very loud and clear, as if he was shouting beside your ear. It was very ear-piercing. Zhuo's gaze was calm. Looking at Hu Ben, who was half his height, he said coolly, no matter what? You want to kill me? Hu Ben sneered and said, Is there something wrong with your head? It's a matter of course for us foreign races to kill you humans. In our eyes, you humans are only fit to be prey. Speaking up to here, Hu Ben appeared impatient and continued, Still not telling me about Lung Bai? It's your greatest honor to be able to leave you a complete corpse. Don't push your luck. Zhuo chuckled. His gaze was as sharp as a knife, and his tone was calm as water as he said, I really know quite a bit about Lung Bai. Don't talk so much crap. Hurry up and tell me. Hu Ben panted heavily and said coldly, Hoo-hoo, I killed him. Zhuo said. Hu Ben's pupils constricted slightly, and he could not help being stunned. Immediately he flew into a great rage and said, A mere eternal lord, trash actually dares to fool me. Hu Lin, exterminate this trash for me. Hu Ben's words had just come out when another Black Tiger Clan foreign race member walked out from the team behind him. The team that Hu Ben led this time was basically all members of their Black Tiger Clan. This Hu Lin's strength was considered to be at the bottom in their team. He was merely just an eternal lord. But the Black Tiger Clan's talent was extraordinary. In the same rank, their strength far surpassed humans. In Hu Ben's view, Hu Lin's cultivation was the same as this human in front of him, but he was able to brutally torture this human to death. Don't let this human die so easily. Let him suffer a little more pain. When Hu Lin passed by Hu Ben's side, Hu Ben said coolly. Hu Ben did not deliberately lower his voice. His voice was loud and clear. Zhuo Wen's side heard it clearly. Zhuo Wen knew that this was deliberately done by Hu Ben. Lord Hu Ben, don't worry. Even if you didn't say it, I would still do it. Daring to lie to our respected Lord Hu Ben. This human is tired of living, he. Hu Lin's voice was slightly gloomy and cold. He bowed respectfully towards Hu Ben and walked towards Zhuo Wen. A pair of slender and dark eyes stared straight at Zhuo Wen. Bang! When Hu Lin took the 7th step, he suddenly stomped his right foot. The sound of a cannonball being fired rang out. Hu Lin shot out explosively, like an arrow leaving the bow. Hu Lin's acceleration was unexpected. If it were an ordinary person, they would definitely be frightened by Hu Lin's sudden actions. Unfortunately, Zhuo Wen was not an ordinary person. He looked at Hu Lin, who flew over, the corners of his mouth full of mockery. It was fine if this Hu Ben looked down on him. But even this Hu Lin dared to look down on him too. He actually had a look of indifference. This was not putting him in his eyes at all. Human, don't worry. I won't kill you right away. I'll let you live for a while longer. Hu Lin's savage laughter was just inches away. Zhuo Wen slowly raised his head and discovered that Hu Lin had already appeared in front of him, and that huge fist of Hu Lin's was reflected in his eyes, as if it could directly tear Zhuo Wen's entire body apart in the next moment. Hu Lin saw Zhuo Wen's stunned appearance and felt even more disdain in his heart. This human in front of him was indeed a coward to actually be scared silly. Getting rid of this kind of trash, he did not feel any sense of accomplishment at all. Thinking of this, the strength of Hu Lin's right fist decreased a lot, and the target of his fist was originally towards Zhuo Wen's face, but now it had changed to Zhuo Wen's abdomen. He was afraid that if he did not control his strength well, he would kill this human in front of him with a single punch. Crack! Suddenly, the crisp sound of bones cracking rang out. Chapter 30:14. Bombardment. Hu Lin was much taller than Zhuo Wen. At this moment, his back was facing them. After throwing out a punch, he stood there motionlessly. Zhuo Wen's figure was basically covered by Hu Lin, so Hu Ben could not see clearly what was going on with Zhuo Wen. However, Hu Ben could clearly see that Hu Lin's body was trembling. Although the trembling was not big, it was still discovered by Hu Ben. Something's not right. Hu Ben's eyes narrowed. Just as he finished speaking, the sound of bones cracking became even louder, followed by a shrill scream. Only then did Hu Ben realize that the scream came from Hu Lin. Hu Lin's entire body was trembling. His body tilted, and he could not help but fall to the side. Hu Ben finally saw clearly that the human youth that he looked down on was holding a white blade in his hand. This blade was over a meter long and completely white. It emitted a dazzling light and a soul-stirring aura. This blade pierced through Hu Lin's fist and followed along Hu Lin's fist, directly piercing through his entire arm. Fresh blood poured out from the wound on Hu Lin's arm without any regard for his life. It looked very bloody and terrifying. Pucci! Zhuo Wen's gaze was cold and emotionless. His right hand that held the blade suddenly swung, and instantly Hu Lin's right arm exploded into a bloody mist. Hu Lin screamed, his eyes filled with fear. How could this be? How could this human be so strong? Hu Lin wanted to retreat, but to his horror, He realized that the human in front of him had already formed a seal with his right hand, forming a huge blade of light and piercing towards his heart. Hu Lin did not expect this human to be so sinister, to actually have such a trick up his sleeve. His heart was directly pierced through by the blade of light. Hu Lin's entire body was pierced through. His entire body twitched, and he kept struggling. Unfortunately, Zhuwen's gaze was cold, and he did not even look at Hu Lin. Instead, he pulled out the blade of light in his left hand and unceremoniously pierced towards Hu Lin's forehead. Puchi! Hu Lin glared at Zhuwen, his eyes filled with unwillingness, regret, and resentment. In the end, his vision turned black, and he collapsed to the ground, completely losing his breath. The sky-opening blade was a divine ability created by Pangu. It was extremely destructive. As long as the sky-opening blade pierced through a place, it would basically be impossible for it to remain intact. Since the space between Hu Lin's eyebrows had been pierced through, it was obvious that the soul in between his eyebrows could not have survived. It must have been destroyed as well. Plop! Hu Lin's huge body fell to the ground, while Zhuwen kept his sky-splitting blade, raised his head, and looked indifferently at Hu Ben, who was already in a daze. "You sent this kind of trash to kill me. Aren't you looking down on me too much?" Zhuwen's expression was grave and stern, but the mocking smile at the corner of his mouth became even more intense. In Hu Ben's eyes it was so glaring. "Did you really kill Lung Bai?" Hu Ben's gaze became serious, and he began to carefully size up the human before him. Previously he did not believe it, but now he somewhat believed it. Although Hu Lin's cultivation level was not high, his strength was extremely terrifying. He could even battle a human half-step Genesis tier, but he had been killed with a single move by this human youth before him. Perhaps this human really was the real culprit behind Lung Bai's death. Your ears are probably not very good, right? Do you need me to repeat this sentence?" Zhuwen smiled coldly and slowly retreated, pulling a certain distance away from Hu Ben and the others. The team Hu Ben had brought with him was not small, and among them there were over 70 outsiders. Added with such a powerful leader like Hu Ben, Jiang Qixing, and the others had said that Hu Ben's team was the strongest. He planned to use the distance and use the Ho-E Divine Bow to kill a portion of the outsiders first. "All of you attack. Don't let this human escape." Hu Ben immediately roared when he saw Zhuwen's retreating figure. Whoosh! 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 The outsiders behind Hu Ben all roared, and they transformed into streaks of black shadows that shot toward Zhuwen. Furthermore, these foreign races were very smart. They split up and approached Zhuwen from different directions, completely blocking off all of Zhuwen's escape routes. Zhuwen sneered, and he immediately took out the Ho-E Divine Bow. He drew several Genesis tier divine arrows and shot them out. Instantly, the outsiders who were charging at the forefront of the group were pierced through by the divine arrows. Moreover, the recoil of the divine arrows was very strong, and they pierced through 3 outsiders in a row, piercing them together. The terrifying killing intent seeped into the bodies of the 3 outsiders, causing them to scream in agony. In the end, they exploded into clouds of blood and disappeared from the world. Moreover, these divine arrows seemed to have a mind of their own. After killing one outsider, they would chase after the next one. In just 10 breaths of time, close to half of the outsiders had died under the divine arrows. Hu Ben was dumbfounded. He finally understood why this human in front of him said that he was the murderer of Lung Bai. It turned out that he had such a terrifying treasure on him. A mere human actually has such a powerful divine weapon. No wonder he is so arrogant. Today, this divine weapon will be mine. Although Hu Ben felt a little sorry for his subordinates who kept dying, his eyes were filled with greed. Hu Ben was tempted by the Ho-E Divine Bow in Zhuwen's hands. He wanted to take it for his own use. Bang! Hu Ben was like a ferocious tiger descending from the mountain. He rushed to the nearest divine arrow and blasted it with his palm. The moment Hu Ben blasted out his palm, a huge tiger claw appeared and slapped the surface of the divine arrow. Ding! The divine arrow was directly sent flying. After rolling a few times in the air, the light on its surface dimmed. Bang! 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 Hu Ben's figure was like lightning. He flickered a few times in the air and slapped away the divine arrows. Then he rushed straight toward Zhuowen. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and became a little serious. Hu Ben's strength was not simple. He was far above Sha Ru and Lung Bai. He was actually a peak creator. He was probably not much weaker than Moses of the mermaid race. After shooting a few more arrows, Zhuowen formed a seal with both hands and used the sky blade. He stomped his feet and rushed toward Hu Ben. When Hu Ben saw that Zhuowen had actually shot out a few more arrows, his gaze turned cold. He had originally planned to intercept the divine arrow again, but he did not expect that Zhuowen had already arrived with the white light blade in his hands. You dare to meet me face to face? You don't know how the word death is written. Hu Ben coldly looked at Zhuowen. He punched out with both fists and let out a shocking tiger roar. Bang! 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 In just an instant, Zhuowen and Hu Ben exchanged a few punches. Zhuowen was directly sent flying, spitting out a mouthful of blood. His face was extremely pale. Hu Ben, on the other hand, was only unsteady. He looked at Zhuowen in surprise. He obviously didn't expect this human, who was just an eternal overlord, to be able to compete with him. This was really not simple. However, Hu Ben also knew that the gap between him and this human was too big. If they continued to fight, this human would undoubtedly die. However, Hu Ben didn't chase after him. His gaze fell on the divine arrows that were wreaking havoc among the alien races, especially when he saw that his subordinates were either dead or injured by the divine arrows. He knew that he had to stop these divine arrows. Chapter 30:15. Make inquiries. Zhuowen stopped in the distant void. When he saw Hu Ben turn around to save his subordinates, he knew that he had made the right bet. At the same time, he wiped the cold sweat off his forehead as he thought to himself that the gap between his original body and a pinnacle god of creation like Hu Ben was just too great. If it weren't for the profound creation mysterious light protecting him, he wouldn't just be injured, he would have most likely been crippled. He knew that the only way to deal with Hu Ben was to use Ho Yi's godly arrow. With this in mind, Zhuowen pulled out a blood-stained horn from his great world. It was none other than Ho Yi's divine arrow. Zhuowen knocked the Ho Yi divine arrow on the bowstring, then suddenly pulled the bowstring to a full moon. Crackle! A thunderous sound rang out as a shocking killing intent spread out. Hu Ben blasted away the last arrow and saw that he had already killed 2/3 of his subordinates. The remaining 1/3 were basically injured. This caused Hu Ben's face to turn ugly. He scattered all of it on Zhuowen's body. He would definitely torture this human properly before letting him die. Thinking of this, Hu Ben was about to turn around and charge at Zhuowen when he suddenly felt a terrifying killing intent that made his entire body numb. Hu Ben suddenly turned around. Only then did he see that the human in front of him, who he hated the most, was holding a different divine arrow. The aura emanating from this divine arrow was far, far more powerful than that of the god of creation's stage divine arrows that had been unleashed. Especially that killing intent. It made his hair stand on end and made him feel extremely uncomfortable. Is this his trump card? When Hu Ben sent those divine arrows flying, he actually had quite a bit of misgivings in his heart. Although these divine arrows were powerful, they were still lacking if they wanted to kill a golden dragon like Lung Bai. After all, Lung Bai possessed the dragon pearl that even Hu Ben was somewhat fearful of. These mere divine arrows might cause quite a bit of damage to Lung Bai, but wanting to kill Lung Bai was a joke. Now, Hu Ben finally knew how Lung Bai died. It was very likely that he was killed by this terrifying arrow. Whoosh! While Hu Ben was lost in thought, Zhuowen released the bowstring. The Ho Yi god's arrow tore through space and arrived in front of Hu Ben in an instant, brimming with killing intent and terrifying power. At this moment, Hu Ben did not think about anything. Instead, he roared towards the sky and began to transform into his original form, an incomparably huge black tiger. This black tiger was even more terrifying and huge than the golden dragon that Lang Bai had transformed into. Its 4 limbs were covered in layers of muscles, and its aura seemed to be able to suppress all obstacles. Bang! The black tiger suddenly lashed out with a tiger claw, intending to take Hoi's divine arrow head-on. To Zhou Wen's surprise, the black tiger's right claw really did manage to block the arrow. Although it was rather difficult, it did manage to stop the arrow from moving forward. However, the black tiger didn't last for too long. Hou Yi's arrow actually erupted with even more terrifying killing intent, and the black tiger's right claw was directly blasted into a ball of bloody mist before piercing deep into the black tiger's chest. Roar! The black tiger screamed into the sky and began to roll around in the void. Its huge eyes revealed extreme pain. Boom! The black tiger struggled for a while, and a bloody hole suddenly appeared on its back. The Hou Yi god's arrow shot out from the bloody hole. Brother Jiang, come out and take care of the remaining foreign races. After sending a message to Jiang Qixing, Zhou Wen slowly landed beside the black tiger. At this moment, Jiang Qixing and the others who were hiding in the dark were all fired up after receiving Zhou Wen's message. They left their hiding places and began to encircle and annihilate the remaining foreign races. In a short while, the remaining foreign races were completely wiped out by Jiang Qixing and the others. Zhou Wen looked at the black tiger in front of him and found that it was not completely dead. From its undulating abdomen, it could be seen that the black tiger was indeed still alive, but it wouldn't live for much longer. The killing intent that the Hou Yi god's arrow carried was extremely terrifying. After being enhanced by the Hou Yi god's bow, its killing intent was even more terrifying and destructive. If such a terrifying divine object pierced through one's body, the terrifying killing intent would be able to destroy all life in one's body. No matter how strong one's life force was, they wouldn't be able to live for long. The fact that the black tiger was able to last until now was enough to prove how tenacious his life force was. The black tiger glared at Zhou Wen with hatred. He was really unwilling to die like this. Hu Ben, let me ask you, where did the Phoenix people's Saintess and Moses go? Zhou Wen asked indifferently. Logically speaking, Sha Ru, Lang Bai, and Hu Ben, the foreign race's geniuses, should be close to Moses and the Phoenix people's Saintess. They should be in contact with each other often in the door of darkness. Now that he had eliminated Sha Ru, Lang Bai, Hu Ben, and their teams, Moses, and the Phoenix people's Saintess didn't seem to have done anything. They went to find the exit. Seeing that they haven't appeared, I'm afraid they have already found the right exit. The black tiger's voice was very weak. Then do you know where the real exit is? Zhou Wen asked with a smile. Hu Ben sneered and said, I'm a dying man and you're the culprit who killed me. Do you think I'll tell you? I don't need you to tell me. I know where the exit is. I'm going to ask you a question about the Phoenix People Saintess. If you don't answer, then fine. I'll pull out your divine soul and forcefully extract your memories. Then, I'll use the divine fire to constantly roast you. I'll make you beg for death. Zhou Wen's voice was calm, but the words he said were as sharp and ruthless as needles. Hu Ben's body trembled slightly. Although he wasn't afraid of death, he was very afraid of his divine soul being tortured. That wasn't a pain that ordinary people could endure. What do you want to ask about the Saintess? Hu Ben's expression was ugly as he asked in a deep voice. I want to ask about the Phoenix people's Saintess background. And when did she become the Saintess? Zhou Wen asked. The Phoenix people's Saintess was a new Saintess 3 years ago. As for her origin, she is naturally from the Phoenix people. It is said that the Saintess has the 99 Phoenix body, which is a terrifying physique that is rarely seen in countless years. In our great desolate heaven realm, the Phoenix people's Saintess is like thunder to the ears. Everyone knows about her. Hu Ben replied honestly. 99 Phoenix body? Zhuowen's pupils suddenly shrank. He remembered that when the Phoenix People experts took away Mu Qinxue, they had also said that Mu Qinxue had the rare 99 Phoenix body. And this new Phoenix People Saintess actually also had the 99 Phoenix body. Could it be a coincidence? Is there anyone else in the Phoenix People who has the 99 Phoenix body? Zhuowen asked while breathing heavily. Chapter 3016. Leave. Huh. Zhuowen felt a bolt of lightning flash through his mind as it exploded. The Phoenix People's Sacred Maiden was the only Phoenix People's 99 Phoenix body. This also meant that the Sacred Maiden was Mu Qinxue? Impossible. She definitely isn't Qinxue. Zhuowen calmed down. He had looked at the Phoenix People's Sacred Maiden before, and although the Sacred Maiden's eyes were bright and beautiful, they definitely weren't Mu Qinxue's eyes. This was because he couldn't find any sense of familiarity in those eyes, even the Sacred Maiden's figure and body language. He couldn't find any sense of familiarity. Zhuowen was certain that this Sacred Maiden wasn't Mu Qinxue and should be someone else. But this girl had the same 99 Phoenix body as Mu Qinxue, so what was going on? Adding in what Hu Ben said, the Phoenix People didn't have two geniuses with the 99 Phoenix body. Then where did Mu Qinxue go? Then do you know if the Phoenix People have a disciple named Mu Qinxue? Zhuowen asked in a deep voice. Hu Ben coughed out a mouthful of blood and his aura became weaker. He shook his head and no longer said anything as he closed his eyes. Zhuowen silently looked at Hu Ben in front of him. He knew that even if he didn't make a move, Hu Ben wouldn't live for long. Hu Ben shook his head in the end. It was clear that he had never heard of the name Mu Qinxue before. I want to use the heavenly divination technique to calculate Mu Qinxue's fortune. Zhuowen's eyes had a trace of worry. He always thought that Mu Qinxue would be well received by the Phoenix People. So he didn't use the heavenly divination technique to calculate anything related to Mu Qinxue. Now that he realized that something was wrong, he knew that he had to use the heavenly divination technique. At this moment, after Jiang Qixing and the others took care of the other races, they all gathered around Zhuowen. However, when they saw Zhuowen sitting cross-legged on the ground with his hands forming seals, as if he was calculating something, they were all silent and didn't disturb Zhuowen. An hour later, strange ripples appeared around Zhuowen. These ripples passed without a trace, but they made Jiang Qixing and the others' hearts palpitate. However, these ripples quickly dissipated. Jiang Qixing and the others wanted to investigate, but the ripples didn't seem to exist. This made them a bit confused. Pucci! Suddenly, Zhuowen spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes opened of the Phoenix People, of course. Zhuowen was Mu Qinxue earlier. He had used the heavenly divination technique to calculate the outcome of Mu Qinshue's misfortune, not hesitating to expend even more of his lifespan. Qinxue, Qinxue, Qinxue. Had he of Qinshue's, Qinxue of Qinxue, 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 Xue Qinxue of a fate. Qin Xue Qinshue's Qinxue, Xue Qinning. Who did it? Zhuowen muttered in a low voice. He clenched his fists, and the sound of bones cracking could be heard. Brother Long, what happened? Jiang Qixing also noticed that Zhuowen was in a bad mood, especially after seeing Zhuowen vomit blood. He couldn't help but ask worriedly, "Thank you for your concern, Brother Jiang. I'm fine." Zhuowen waved his hand, a trace of loneliness and worry in his eyes. He did not expect that the art of divination would not be able to predict Mu Qinshue's fate. He knew that someone must have deliberately concealed Mu Qinshue's fate. But who was it? To be able to block the fate of a cultivator. Just how powerful must one's cultivation be? However, Zhuowen did not become dispirited because of this. Instead, his eyes were filled with determination. He knew that the only way to find out about Mu Qinshue's whereabouts was to look for the Phoenix People. The people from the Phoenix People who had come to the dark portal this time were the Phoenix People's Sacred Lady and the two clan elders, Elder Hong. I'll go find the Phoenix People's sacred lady first. This time, I must find her and get to the bottom of this. Zhuowen knew that with his current strength, the gap between him and the 2 clan elders of the Phoenix People was too big. The 2 of them were not equal at all. The 2 clan elders would probably ignore him, and they might even attack him. Although the Phoenix People's sacred lady was brilliant, talented, and far stronger than her peers, Zhuowen was not weak either. He cultivated the Pangu's sacred body, and his strength was earth-shattering among his peers. He could already feel that his clone, which had integrated with the Gong parasite in the Great World, would soon break through to the 6-star Pangu sacred body. If his clone could reach the 6-star Pangu sacred body, Zhuowen believed that he could crush all the cultivators who had entered the dark portal this time, including the mysterious Phoenix People's sacred lady. At this moment, Zhuowen's communication jade talisman lit up. Zhuowen picked up the communication jade talisman and found that the message was from Ma Yujie. According to the message, Ma Yujie and the others had gone in the wrong direction and did not leave the exit of this area. Ma Yujie also asked Zhuowen if he was going in the right direction. Zhuowen was a little embarrassed. He had just found the passage in the void when he found Luo Shi and Wu Jian were being chased by the alien race. After saving Luo Shi and Wu Jian, and learning that the alien race was chasing after the humans, Zhuowen hastily covered up the entrance of the passage and came to kill the alien race team. Until now, he had not had time to go to the void passage to see what was going on. Zhuowen sent a message to Ma Yujie, asking him to come and meet him first. Then he said to Luo Shi, Wu Jian, and the others, "What are you going to do next?" Luo Shi and Wu Jian looked at each other, and Luo Shi said with shame, "Senior Brother Long, can we follow you for the time being?" "Follow me?" Zhuowen was taken aback and then shook his head to say, "I'm sorry, I still have some important matters to attend to, and it's not convenient for me to bring you along." Zhuowen had only met Luo Shi and Wu Jian once, and Zhuowen would naturally not bring them along with him after saving them, to become their free bodyguards. Moreover, the threat of the alien race had been dealt with by him and Luo Shi, and Wu Jian's safety was guaranteed, so there was no need for them to follow him. Moreover, Zhuowen had quite a number of secrets on him, and if Luo Shi and Wu Jian were to follow him, it would be very inconvenient for him. Luo Shi's face flushed red. She knew that her request was a little overboard, and seeing Zhuowen reject her so bluntly, she forced a smile and did not mention anything about following Zhuowen anymore. "The 4 of you, Brother Jiang and I still have some matters to attend to, and we'll take our leave now." Zhuowen cupped his fists at Luo Shi, Xingjing, and the others before he led Jiang Qisheng away. Looking at Zhuowen's departing back, Xingjing could not help but exclaim in admiration, "This Longwen is really a freak. He's obviously just an itinerant cultivator, but he actually possesses such powerful powers." Su Chunshin nodded in agreement and said, "This person is already a top prodigy, like Zhongli Haoyan and Yi Qidong. I feel that if Zhongli Haoyan really fought with this person, he would not have much of a chance of winning." Luo Shi and Wu Jian were both shocked. Xingjing and Su Qinshin's evaluation of Long Wen was just too high. Chapter 3017. In the land of space-time distortion, let's notify our other brothers and sisters first. They don't need to hide anymore. The problem of the alien invaders has been completely dealt with, Xingjing suddenly suggested. Xu Qinshen and Luo Shi agreed, and they sent word to all the cultivators they knew about this matter. Soon, the cultivators who'd been hiding all over the gear zone emerged from their hiding places, cheering that the alien invaders had been dealt with. It was also at this moment that the name of the dragon rune was spread by word of mouth. Almost all cultivators who had entered the gear zone and were lucky enough to survive knew of the existence of the dragon rune. They all knew that he'd single-handedly dealt with the 3 powerful alien teams. Many of them were sincerely grateful to this Longwen whom they'd never even met. Of course, there were also some cultivators who had doubts. They felt that the alien teams were terrifyingly powerful, and that Zhuowen couldn't possibly have dealt with them all by himself. Of course, none of this had anything to do with Zhuowen. Zhuowen was currently standing at the entrance to the void tunnel he'd first discovered, waiting silently. Before long, a streak of light swept over from the distance. The first to enter Zhuowen's eyes was a fatty, and behind him was an extremely beautiful young woman. These two were Ma Yujie and Yao Xiangjuan, who'd split up with Zhuowen earlier. Longwen, have you checked the void tunnel yet? Ma Yujie's expression was ugly. His eyes were gloomy as he first glanced at the void tunnel before looking toward Zhuowen. Not yet. I was waiting for you to go in together. Zhuowen smiled faintly. Ma Yujie's gaze darkened, like a volcano about to erupt. Zhuowen was a little confused. What was wrong with this fatty? His expression didn't seem right as soon as they met. Yao Xiangjuan was the first to speak. Brother Long, the place we went to just now was a void tunnel similar to this one. We went in to explore, but we didn't find anything. We even encountered a Lord of Creation level beast. Thanks to Brother Ma's help, we were able to leave. Zhuowen finally understood why Ma Yujie's expression was so unfriendly. So that was the reason. As it turned out, the fatty was also afraid that the void passage contained a Lord of Creation beast. But of course, Zhuowen was even more wary of Ma Yujie. For this fella to be able to escape unscathed from the hands of the mutated beast of the Master of Creation, his strength must be pretty decent indeed. Brother Ma, you've analyzed it before. There are only 2 exits in this area. Since the passage you're going to is not the exit, then this place should be the real exit. Zhuowen's eyes flashed as he said in a low voice. Only then did Ma Yujie's expression look slightly better, and he said, "Then let's go in and take a look first. However, you will be the vanguard here." At this point, Ma Yujie pointed at Zhuowen. Zhuowen looked at Ma Yujie speechlessly and said, "Then I'll take the lead. You guys follow me closely." With that, Zhuowen took the lead and entered the void passage. Ma Yujie followed closely behind, followed by Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing. As soon as he entered the passageway, Zhuowen actually felt dizzy. It was as if the moment he entered this space-time had been distorted. There was no doubt that the space-time inside this passageway was different from the space-time outside, and the difference was not small. Moreover, Zhuowen noticed that Ma Yujie and Yao Xiangjuan behind him did not show too much of a difference. It seemed that the situation of the passageway they had entered before was not much different from the one they were entering now. Otherwise, they would not have been able to adapt so quickly. Brother Long, be careful. This passageway is too similar to the one Brother Ma and I entered before. Perhaps there really is some danger ahead. Yao Xiangjuan's slightly worried voice came from behind. Zhuowen responded and continued forward. However, as Zhuowen moved forward, he also released his divine sense deep into the end of the passageway in front of him, always on guard. After walking for about a few hours, Zhuowen found that the passageway in front of him was beginning to become wider. Originally, the passageway was only about 1 person's width, but now it had more than doubled in width. Moreover, on the void barrier on both sides of the passageway, green lights were lit one after another. These lights were very cold, without the slightest trace of warmth. Moreover, the moment these green lights were lit, the spacious passageway in front of them began to distort, becoming very irregular. Zhuowen stopped. He could see at a glance that the space-time of the void passageway in front of him was constantly changing. If they continued forward, these distorted space-time would turn into the most terrifying attacks, turning anything that entered into this space-time into powder. F***CK, they're trying to kill us. Even space-time is distorted. We are going to die. Ma Yujie's eyes widened, his voice became strange, and his expression was ugly. You didn't encounter this situation in the previous passageway? Zhuowen asked with a frown. Nonsense, of course not. We just encountered a beast with the strength of a creator. Even if I tried my best, I could barely pass through this kind of space-time distortion zone. Moreover, if the space-time distortion zone is very large, the risk of dying is very high. Ma Yuji's expression was solemn, his eyes flashing as he spoke. When the time comes, follow behind me. I have some understanding of the power of space-time, so I can find the corresponding foothold in this space-time distortion zone. After saying this, Zhuowen stared at the space-time distortion zone in front of him and began to deduce in his mind. Although these space-time distortions looked terrifying, as long as the pattern was found, it was still possible to pass through. Of course, if you were strong enough and did not fear the power of space-time distortion, there was no problem at all to barge through. However, the 4 people present did not have such strength, and even if they did, they would not use the method of barging through. Follow me. After about half an incense stick's time, Zhuowen suddenly took a step forward and entered the space-time distortion zone. Ma Yujie, Yao Xiangjuan, and Jiang Qixing all looked nervously at Zhuowen's back. After discovering that Zhuowen had entered the space-time distortion zone and was unharmed, they all breathed a sigh of relief. They knew that Zhuowen should have found the real foothold in this space-time distortion zone. Without waiting for Zhuowen to call out, the 3 followed Zhuowen's footsteps and stepped into the place where Zhuowen was. Next, Zhuowen and the others walked very slowly. Zhuowen usually needed half an incense stick's worth of time to deduce a foothold, which meant that it would take them 5 incense sticks worth of time to walk 10 steps, which was equivalent to walking 10 steps in an entire afternoon. However, Zhuowen and the others were very patient, although they did not know how big this space-time distortion zone was. Chapter 3018. Limestone chessboard. They had already been in the space-time distortion for 10 days. In these 10 days, they had only walked 480 steps, which was about 300 meters. At first, they thought that the distorted zone wouldn't be very big. But now, it seemed that the area of the distorted zone was beyond their expectations. If this distorted land was thousands of meters long, wouldn't it take them years to leave? Look, the space-time ahead doesn't seem to be distorted anymore. Suddenly, Ma Yujie pointed to the front and exclaimed. Zhuowen hurriedly looked over and saw that a normal passage had appeared about a kilometer away. Seeing that they were finally going to leave this place, the 4 of them perked up. A month later, Zhuowen's group of 4 finally left the distorted space and arrived at the normal tunnel. This passageway was not long, and the 4 of them only spent 2 days to reach the end of the passageway. At the end of the passageway was a stone room that was neither big nor small. There was basically nothing in this stone room. The only decoration was the green stone chessboard in the middle of the stone room. The strange thing was that the chessboard was empty. There was not a single chess piece. This stone chamber is sealed. In other words, this is the end of the passage. There is no other way. Ma Yujie walked around the stone room and frowned. He was a little depressed. Could it be that the void passages we found in both directions are not the correct exits? Jiang Qixing smiled bitterly. Zhuowen observed the stone room and found that it was too ordinary. However, it was precisely because it was too ordinary that he was even more puzzled. Why would such an ordinary stone chamber be hidden in such a mysterious void passage? Moreover, the void passage had a space-time distortion zone. He had personally calculated the distortion of time and space. It was not a natural formation, but a man-made arrangement. Clearly, it was set up to stop intruders. Apart from that, it was obvious that someone had entered the void tunnel before, but there were no signs of them coming out. Moreover, the traces of entry were relatively new. It was obvious that the person had been in there for less than a month. Since that was the case, when they reached the end of the passage, they should be able to see the cultivator who had just entered this place. Even if that cultivator had died, there should be a corpse left behind. It was impossible for there to be no traces at all. However, Zhuowen had observed that whether it was on the road or inside the stone room, there were no traces of cultivators at all. So where did the people who came in first go? Thinking of this, Zhouwen's gaze fell on the green stone chessboard in the center. He found a strand of hair at the southeast corner of the chessboard. Zhouwen picked up the strand of hair and sniffed it. He smelled a refreshing fragrance. Clearly, this strand of hair belonged to a woman, and it had fallen here not long ago. If the hair was here, then where was the person? Brother Long, I suspect that there is something wrong with this chessboard. Ma Yujie came to Zhouwen's side and naturally saw the strand of hair in Zhouwen's hand. He took another look at the green stone chessboard and said in a deep voice. Zhouwen looked at Ma Yujie speechlessly. This fatty must have seen him pick up the strand of hair, and that was why he said that. When Ma Yujie entered the stone room, he didn't even look at the green stone chessboard. However, Zhouwen didn't care about Ma Yujie's belated advice. Instead, he put the strand of hair in the palm of his left hand and formed a seal with his right hand, beginning to use the art of heavenly divination. Speaking of which, after entering this place, Zhouwen had used the art of heavenly divination quite frequently. He had a serious feeling that his body was weaker than before. This weakness didn't come from his physical body, but from his perception of his own lifespan. After all, using the art of heavenly divination cost his lifespan. Zhouwen knew that if he wanted to solve the problem of his lifespan, he could only continue to advance his cultivation base and gain more lifespan. Fortunately, his original body had just advanced to an eternal overlord, so his lifespan had been replenished quite a bit. That was why he had been using the art of heavenly divination repeatedly. This strand of hair belongs to Zhongli Haoyan, and I've calculated that this is the real exit. The key is indeed this green stone chessboard, Zhouwen said. How can this chessboard help us leave this place? I don't see anything special about it. Jiang Qixing circled around the chessboard, his eyes full of puzzlement. Ma Yujie, on the other hand, calmly circled around the chessboard 3 times. Then he pretended to sit at the side and shook his head. If I'm not wrong, this chessboard should be the foundation of a formation. To be more precise, it should be the foundation of a teleportation formation. The chess pieces on this chessboard should be the key to activating the chessboard. Zhouwen interjected. Chess pieces? But there's no chess piece on this chessboard at all. Jiang Qixing glanced at the chessboard, his eyes even more puzzled. Yao Xiangjuan was also puzzled. They didn't know much about formations. Even if Zhouwen and Ma Yujie said that this was a formation, they only knew a little about it at most. I'm afraid the chess pieces were taken by someone who came here first. Ma Yujie suddenly cursed the person who took the chess pieces for being immoral. Zhouwen also agreed with Ma Yujie's guess. In the process of his deduction, he had indeed deduced this matter. Which one of you has jade stones? The higher the grade, the better. Zhouwen said to Ma Yujie and the others, What do you want jade stones for? Ma Yujie asked, puzzled. The chess pieces on this chessboard are refined using jade stones. I plan to refine the chess pieces and place them on this chessboard to completely perfect this formation. When the time comes, we can use this teleportation formation. Zhouwen's eyes were calm. Just now, in the divination of the heavenly divination technique, he saw the vague shadow of a person activating the formation in front of the chessboard. Although he couldn't see the figure clearly, he could see the positions of the chess pieces on the chessboard clearly. He guessed that if he could restore the positions of the chess pieces on the chessboard, he might be able to restore the formation that existed in this chessboard. I have a lot of jade stones here. Ma Yujie quickly took out a pile of jade stones from his spirit ring. Seeing these jade stones, Zhouwen's face suddenly became gloomy. This was because the jade stones that Ma Yujie took out were ordinary, the kind from the mortal world that didn't have much energy at all. Do you have any creation-grade jade stones? Zhouwen asked in a low voice. He felt that the formation of this chessboard was at least of the creation grade, so the jade stones used to make the chess pieces had to be creation grade at least. Creation grade jade stones? Why don't you go rob someone? How could I have them? Ma Yujie put away the jade stones and said unhappily, I know you must have them. This is the key to leaving this place and going to the place where Gongong's body is stored. Are you sure you don't want to contribute some creation-grade jade stones? Of course, if you don't want to, I won't force you. Zhuowen said with a shrug. Damn it! Ma Yujie had no choice but to fiddle around in his spirit ring for a while and take out a bag of jade stones to give to Zhuowen. Chapter 3019. Enter. I'll refine the chess pieces first. During this process, you'd better not disturb me, Zhuowen said, then went to a remote corner of the stone room. He poured out all the jade stones from the cloth bag and began to refine them one by one. Jiang Qixing, Ma Yujie, and Yao Xiangjuan naturally nodded. Even if Zhuowen hadn't said anything, they wouldn't have bothered Zhuowen. Zhuowen meticulously refined the jade stones into sparkling and translucent chess pieces. There were a total of 361 chess pieces on the chessboard, but Zhuowen didn't refine 361 chess pieces. He only refined 200 of them. Relying on the art of divine calculation, he already knew the positions of the chess pieces on the chessboard and knew that there were only 200 chess pieces on the board. Zhuowen spent 6 hours and finally refined 200 chess pieces. Brother Long, do you know how to arrange these chess pieces? Yao Xiangjuan asked the question in her heart. I know. Just watch. Zhuowen put away the chess pieces and went to the chessboard. Immediately, he began to arrange the chess pieces in an orderly manner on the chessboard. Ma Yujie and the others watched silently with furrowed brows. They didn't know much about chess, so they were a little confused. Even Zhuowen didn't know much about chess, so he didn't know much about the arrangement of the chess pieces in his calculation. He only knew how to follow the instructions. Soon, Zhuowen had arranged all 200 chess pieces on the chessboard. A powerful aura surged out from the chessboard, as if a giant dragon had just awakened from its slumber. What a mysterious aura! This chessboard seems to be alive. Zhuowen, Ma Yujie, and the others couldn't help but take a few steps back when this aura swept out. They looked at the green stone chessboard in amazement. At this moment, the surface of the green stone chessboard was emitting a green light. The chess pieces arranged on the chessboard began to connect together. Soon after, a green line appeared on the surface of each chess piece. A total of 200 lines rushed out of the chessboard and intertwined in the air above the chessboard. These lines began to form and combine, forming a green formation. The surface of the formation was covered with dense patterns. These patterns revealed an ancient and vicissitude aura. From this, one could tell that this formation was definitely not ordinary. This should be a teleportation array, but it's not the teleportation array of our era. The method of setting up the array is very ancient and is rarely seen in our era. Ma Yujie carefully observed the formation that appeared above and explained in a low voice. Zhuowen nodded. He knew that Ma Yujie's attainments in the Tao of arrays were much higher than his. He could also see what the latter had said. Let's go. Let's go in. Zhuowen was the first to enter the array, followed by Ma Yujie, Yao Xiangjuan, and Jiang Qixing. However, the moment they entered the formation, Zhuowen immediately discovered that the teleportation process was actually very slow. This is probably the first generation of teleportation arrays. Each teleportation takes at least several hours. Ma Yujie fell into the formation and quickly noticed the abnormality. He said with a gloomy gaze, "It doesn't matter. We just need to wait in this formation for a few hours." Zhuowen did not mind. Just as Ma Yujie said, the formation was finally completely activated after several hours, and the four of them gradually disappeared into the formation. When Zhuowen opened his eyes again, what entered his eyes were endless ruins. At the end of the ruins, Zhuowen saw a huge figure lying in the void. "We're here!" Ma Yujie looked at the huge figure with unconcealable excitement in his eyes. That should be the physical body of ancestral Shaman Gongong. Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing's gazes also fell on the huge figure, their bodies trembling with excitement. There's someone there. Zhuowen's gaze fell below the huge figure. He saw several figures, but because they were too far away, he could not see clearly, so he could not recognize who they were. I'm afraid it's the cultivators who came in before us. It should be Zhong Li, Haoyan, Yi Qidong, and the others. Of course, the Phoenix People Saintess and Moses should be there too. Jiang Qixing said, Let's go and take a look. Zhuowen said and led the three of them forward. This space was not big, and it was surrounded by a zone of nothingness. There was nothing in it. In this space, the only thing that existed was the huge corpse of Gonggong floating in the void. Below Gonggong's corpse was a huge square carved from white marble. There were 12 huge white stone pillars in the square, and in the center of the square, surrounded by the 12 stone pillars, was a rather huge altar. The altar was circular and had 3 levels in total. At the top of the altar, there were many bone flags. These bone flags fluttered in the wind, and a mysterious aura drifted out. There was a layer of light blue energy barrier around the square. At this moment, there were more than 10 figures standing outside the square. These figures were divided into 2 groups and stood on both sides of the square, faintly showing signs of confrontation. Among them, the smaller group was the human clan. There were only about 5 of them. Among the 5, Zhuowen had only seen the 2 leaders, Zhongli Haoyan and Yi Qidong. As for the other 3, Zhuowen did not know them at all. The number of people from the other clan was twice that of the human clan. There were 10 of them, and the leaders were the Phoenix People's Saintess and Moses. Saintess, what do you mean by this? Do you plan to fight us outside the square? Zhong Li Haoyan's beautiful eyes fell on the veiled Phoenix People's Saintess, and her voice was as cold as winter. The body of Ancestral which Gonggong is ours. You have no right to touch it. The Phoenix People's Saintess said arrogantly. Zhong Li Haoyan sneered and said, You do have the advantage in numbers, but you're still lacking if you want to take us down. Also, you other clan are not good at formations. You think you can break the defensive formation on the surface of the square? At this point, Zhong Li Haoyan's mouth was full of mockery. Sure enough, after hearing this, the Phoenix People's Saintess frowned and fell silent. Moses, who was standing beside the Phoenix People's Saintess, had a fierce look in his eyes. He said coldly, We'll cripple you and make you our slaves. Do you dare not break the formation for us? Moses, you're very arrogant. Do you really think that the human clan is easy to bully? Yi Qidong was so angry that he laughed. He stepped forward and looked coldly at Moses. He continued, Do you have the guts to fight me? Hee hee. Why wouldn't I? Chapter 3020. Cooperation. Speaking of which, Moses had always looked down on the human race. He felt that the gap between the human race and the alien race was too great. Yi Qidong's cultivation was indeed not bad, and after entering the door of darkness, he had even broken through to the peak of the creator stage by chance. However, Moses didn't think much of it. He was also a peak creator stage expert, and one with a powerful bloodline at that. His strength far exceeded that of the peak creator stage experts of the human race. In front of him, this Yi Qi tunnel was really nothing. Bang, bang, bang. In just an instant, Moses and Yi Qidong collided and then separated. Moses landed on the ground and looked at Yi Qidong, who had also landed in front of him. His gaze became very serious. You're just a human. How can you be so powerful? You're actually on par with me. Moses's eyes flashed fiercely. Don't think that only you alien races can be invincible in the same realm. Don't look down on others. Yi Qidong's gaze was cold and his voice was calm. Moses looked deeply at Yi Qidong and smiled faintly. Just now you clashed head-on with me. You must have suffered some injuries. Ha. Then you and I can fight again and see if it's what you think it is. Yi Qidong said unconcernedly. Moses fell silent. Just now, when he clashed with Yi Qidong, He felt that Yi Qidong should have fallen into a slight disadvantage. He guessed that Yi Qidong must have suffered some injuries, but Yi Qidong had forcibly suppressed them. Of course, this was purely his guess. If Yi Qidong wasn't injured and he attacked again, it wouldn't be good. He definitely wouldn't be able to defeat Yi Qidong in a short time. Just as Zhongli Haoyan said, there weren't many alien races who understood formations, and they didn't know much about the formations around the square. If they relied on them to break the formations, it would probably take forever. Thus, they still had to rely on Zhongli Haoyan's help. This was because they remembered that the genius of the Scarlet Heaven Sword Tower, Sidu Liangji, on Zhongli Haoyan's side was a creator stage divine array master. He was more proficient in formations than anyone here. If the foreign races could completely crush the human race and suppress the human race, they could teach the human a lesson and capture Situ Liangji alive to help them break the formation. Unfortunately, even though the human race had fewer people than the foreign race, they weren't much weaker. Once the two sides started fighting, they would have to pay a huge price. It was obviously not worth it. Just as Yi Qidong and Moses were about to draw their swords, the Phoenix People's Holy Maiden suddenly opened her mouth and said, "There's no need for the two of you to harm each other. Our humankind and the non-humankind are still allies, so we naturally need to work together and help each other. We have to work together to completely break this formation. Otherwise, it will be difficult for any of us to succeed." Zhongli Haoyan sneered and said, "Didn't the Holy Maiden arrogantly say that she wanted to cripple all of us and make us your slaves, and then unconditionally break the formation for you? What happened now? Are you admitting defeat?" The Phoenix People's Holy Maiden frowned. She didn't like Zhongli Haoyan's tone and shook her head. "I was just joking. Now that the human race and the non-humankind are still allies, we have to work together, right? Hee. Do you really think that our humankind and the non-humankind are allies?" Suddenly, a clear voice full of sarcasm sounded, attracting the attention of the humans and non-humankind outside the square. The Phoenix People's Holy Maiden, Zhongli Haoyan, and the others all looked in the direction of the voice and saw 4 people walking towards them. The person in the lead was a young man with 2 scars on his face, and there were 3 people behind him. One of them was an extremely fat man who attracted a lot of attention. Other than the fat man, the other 2 were a man and a woman, and the voice just now was naturally from the woman. "You must be Junior Martial Sister Yao from the Heaven and Earth Divine Sect." Zhongli Haoyan's beautiful eyes fell on Yao Xiangjuan, and she couldn't help but exclaim with joy. The human race had too few people, so they were at a disadvantage against the non-humankind. However, with the addition of Zhouwen's group, they were more confident. The Phoenix People's Holy Maiden and Moses also saw Zhouwen's group of 4, and their brows furrowed slightly. "I didn't think that Senior Martial Sister, Zhongli, would still remember me. I'm so happy." Yao Xiangjuan bowed towards Zhongli Haoyan. Zhongli Haoyan immediately helped Yao Xiangjuan up and hurriedly told them not to be overly courteous. Then Zhongli Haoyan looked at Zhouwen and said, "I remember that you're called Longwen, right?" Zhouwen glanced at Zhongli Haoyan and nodded. "That's right, Miss Zhongli's memory is indeed outstanding. I'm impressed." Zhongli Haoyan smiled slightly and didn't mind Zhouwen's slightly flattering words. Instead, she said in a deep voice, "When I was in the Starry Sky Tower, I accidentally saw a name on the Starry Sky contribution list. I remember that name was also called Longwen. In a short time, this name soared from the 70s to the 35th place. At that time, I was quite curious about this Longwen. I just don't know if that Longwen is you." Zhouwen smiled slightly and said, "What do you think, Miss Zhongli?" "Hee, it should be you." Zhongli Haoyan smiled faintly. Zhouwen nodded and didn't deny it. Back then, the name he had engraved on the Starry Sky token was Longwen. The reason why his ranking soared so quickly was probably because he had killed Sauron at that time. That was why he had obtained so many points, causing his ranking to soar. At this moment, Yi Qidong also came to Jiang Qixing's side and said something to him. Seeing the two of them talking and laughing, they should be reminiscing about the past. Right, who is this person? Suddenly, Zhongli Haoyan's beautiful eyes fell on Ma Yujie, who was behind Zhuowen, and a trace of doubt appeared on her face. She knew most of the human cultivators who entered the door of darkness, but this fatty in front of her was extremely unfamiliar to her. She had no impression of him at all. Hee, this fat lord is called Ma Yujie, rogue, cultivator. In the future, if you follow this fat lord, you will be able to eat and drink well. Ma Yujie patted his chest and said. Zhongli Haoyan smiled slightly and ignored Ma Yujie. Obviously, she thought this fatty was bragging. Of course. Only Zhuowen knew that Ma Yujie wasn't bragging. This fatty's origin was too mysterious, especially the ancient era that the fatty mentioned. This made Zhuowen very curious. What kind of place was that? Chapter 30:21. Probe formation on the human side. Apart from Zhongli and Haoyan, no one else spoke to Zhuowen, including Yi Qidong. They didn't even greet Zhuowen. Zhuowen deliberately saw the contempt in the eyes of the other humans. Clearly, the eternal overlord aura he revealed was too weak, so they didn't care too much. Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing were more popular than Zhuowen and Ma Yujie. A few people often went over to talk to them. Jiang Qixing's cultivation level was at the mid-stage of the Genesis Overlord realm. Although it wasn't very high in this team, he was still a Genesis Overlord and naturally received the approval of the others. As for Yao Xiangjuan, although she was only an eternal Overlord, she was simply too beautiful. Her beauty could cause the downfall of nations. Even third step Dao Vindication cultivators would have a good impression of her and try to get close to her. Zhuowen didn't care about the other people's attitude towards him. His gaze had already landed on the foreign race team opposite him. The veiled holy maiden of the Phoenix. People couldn't help but narrow his eyes slightly. The Phoenix people's holy maiden also noticed Zhuowen's gaze. She glanced at Zhuowen and frowned slightly. Clearly, she was a little dissatisfied with the way Zhuowen was looking at her. Little bastard, if you look at our holy maiden again, do you believe that I won't beat the shit out of you? Moses stood in front of the Phoenix people's holy maiden and looked at Zhuowen with an unfriendly scarlet gaze. He didn't hide his murderous intent towards Zhuowen. Little bastard, who are you scolding? Zhuowen mocked. Zhuowen didn't give Moses any face. Moses was certain that Zhuowen had killed Zorro. Before entering the door of darkness, Moses had threatened Zhuowen that he would kill Zhuowen in the door of darkness. The two of them were already in a state of irreconcilable hatred. If Zhuowen still gave him any face, he would really be despicable. Of course, I'm scolding you, Moses blurted out. However, he quickly realized that something was wrong. Long had actually set a trap for him. You're courting death. Moses's face instantly turned ugly. He stomped his right foot and charged towards Zhuowen. However, the instant Moses arrived at Zhuowen's side, Zhongli Haoyan had already made her move. Her palm blasted out like a fuse. Zhuowen saw with his own eyes that the instant Zhongli Haoyan's jade-like palm landed on Moses's fist, a very mysterious, sparkling light erupted. Moses gave a muffled groan as he was sent flying backward. He forcibly twisted his body in midair and barely managed to stop himself in the middle of the non-humankind army. However, the moment Moses landed on the ground, he staggered a little and his cheeks flushed red. Moses looked at Zhongli Haoyan with fear. The latter's strength had shocked him. She was actually stronger than Yi Qidong, and not just by a little, but by a lot. Zhuowen silently looked at Zhongli Haoyan's back, his gaze very solemn. The energy that Zhongli Haoyan had unleashed in that instant had caused him to be extremely fearful. It was as if he hadn't faced a Lord of Creation, but a genuine Lord of Creation, cultivator. However, he knew that Zhongli Haoyan couldn't possibly be a Lord of Creation. She should be around the half-step Lord of Creation. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to enter the door of darkness. From this, it could be seen how terrifying Zhongli Haoyan's battle prowess was. It was still somewhat beyond Zhuowen's expectations. Even the Phoenix people's holy maiden's expression became much more serious. She looked deeply at Zhongli Haoyan as if she wanted to see through her. As expected of the #1 genius on the universal contribution ranking, Zhuowen muttered to himself. He felt that Zhongli Haoyan was indeed amazing. Even he couldn't help but admire her talent. Zhongli Haoyan, what is the meaning of this? Moses stabilized himself and suppressed the anger in his chest as he growled at Zhongli Haoyan. Zhongli Haoyan looked at Moses indifferently and said, "You attacked our friend without any reason, and now you're asking me what I mean? Don't you think your question is very idiotic? This kid doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. He actually dared to humiliate me. What's wrong with me teaching him a lesson?" Moses said angrily, "You attacked my friend, so why can't I help my friend?" Zhongli Haoyan sneered. Moses fell silent. Zhongli Haoyan was right. From Zhongli Haoyan's point of view, helping Longwen was a matter of course. However, Moses was very indignant. He knew that Longwen was Sauron's murderer. Right now, he wanted nothing more than to tear this person to pieces to vent his anger. However, he knew that he couldn't do it now. I can only wait for this kid to be alone before I capture him. At that time, I'll make him suffer a fate worse than death. Moses thought to himself. He calmed down and returned to the alien race team. He didn't say anything else. Moses was too impulsive just now. I apologize to Miss Zhongli here. Next, let's discuss how to break this formation and enter the square. That's the right way. The holy maiden of the Phoenix people smiled and bowed to Zhongli Haoyan. However, she completely ignored the victim this time, Zhuowen. Zhongli Haoyan's anger had also subsided. She nodded and said, "It's fine. The array formation in this plaza is of a high level. Among us, only Brother Situ knows about arrays. He's also a god of creation stage array formation master. Let him take a look. Then we'll have to trouble Miss Zhongli. If there's anything we can do for you, just let us know." The holy maiden of the Phoenix people said with a smile, "Let's see what Brother Situ has to say first." Zhongli Haoyan shook her head and immediately looked at the handsome man standing on the other side. This man was about 30 years old. He was mature and steady. He wore a long white robe and had a very pretentious demeanor. This man was Situ Liangji. When he saw Zhongli Haoyan looking at him, he nodded slightly with a hint of arrogance in his eyes. Situ Liangji walked slowly to the edge of the plaza. With a wave of his sleeve, more than 10 array flags were summoned and surrounded him. "When I'm exploring the array formation, no one is allowed to disturb me." After saying that, Situ Liangji formed a seal with his hands and closed his eyes. He began to carefully explore the array formation in this plaza. Mysterious ripples spread out from the array flags around Situ Liangji. Zhongli Haoyan and the holy maiden of the Phoenix people led their own people and retreated 100 meters. They tried their best not to disturb Situ Liangji's exploration of the array formation. Zhuowen looked at Situ Liangji's exploration of the array formation and could not help but shake his head secretly. Situ Liangji's exploration of the array formation was not wrong, but the direction was wrong. The array formation outside this plaza did look like a defensive array. However, if one observed it carefully, they could see that the array formation was actually changing. In essence, this array formation was not a defensive array. It was a terrifying and powerful killing array. Moreover, there were traces of a trapping array in the changes of the killing array. If Zhuowen's guess was right, this should be a powerful trapping array. Situ Liangji's exploration of the array formation was in the direction of the defensive array. This was completely wrong. However, Zhuowen did not speak. He knew that if he spoke now, he would definitely be dissatisfied with Zhongli Haoyan and the others. Moses would even have an excuse to deal with him. Although he was not afraid of Moses, after all, his doppelganger was still cultivating in the macro world. With the strength of his original body, there was still a big gap between him and Moses. My doppelganger should be advancing soon. As long as it advances, I will not be afraid of anyone here. Chapter 30:22. Fatty attracting hatred. Ma Yujia, who was standing beside Juoen, couldn't help but sneer when he saw Situ Liangji's technique. However, Situ Liangji still restrained himself. Otherwise, he might have attracted the attention of Zhong Li, Haoyan, and the others. For hours later, Situ Liangji waved his sleeves and collected the array flags. He stood up with a solemn expression. "Brother Situ, how is it?" Zhong Li, Haoyan, and Yi Qidong hurried over when they saw the solemn expression on Situ Liangji's face. Zhong Li, Haoyan even asked. On the other side, the Phoenix people's holy maiden, Moses, and the others also came over. They wanted to hear what Situ Liangji had to say. Situ Liangji let out a sigh of relief. He immediately said in a deep voice, "The great formation around this square is not simple. Just now, I checked it and found that the weak points of this great defensive formation are scattered. I'm afraid it won't be easy to find the weak points of this great defensive formation in a short time." Zhong Li, Haoyan, the Phoenix people's holy maiden, and the others were slightly disappointed when they heard Situ Liangji's words. "It's fine. This array is not simple. Brother Situ, you don't have to feel burdened. We will discuss it again after you rest for a while," Zhong Li, Haoyan said with a smile. Situ Liangji's eyes were calm. He said, "This array is not as difficult as you think. As long as I have enough time, it is only a matter of time before I can break it." Zhong Li, Haoyan, the Phoenix people's holy maiden, and the others' eyes lit up. "I will rest for a while. After I recover, I will try again." Situ Liangji said to Zhong Li, Haoyan, and Yi Qidong. He ignored the others and took out a futon. He sat down cross-legged to recover. Probing an array required a divine array master to use his mental energy and divine sense to check the path and direction of the array. It was a very tiring method. Zhong Li, Haoyan, and the others knew how tiring it was to probe the array. They didn't disturb Situ Liangji's recovery. Ma Yujia looked on coldly from the sidelines. He chuckled and said in a low voice, "You've gone in the wrong direction from the beginning. No matter how hard you try, how can you possibly break the formation?" Ma Yujia's voice was as soft as possible, but Situ Liangji's hearing was obviously good. His ears twitched, and he immediately opened his eyes. He looked coldly at Ma Yujia and said, "What did you just say?" Situ Liangji's shout was very loud, which immediately attracted the attention of both the humankind and the non-humankind. Zhong Li, Haoyan, and Yi Qidong also looked over in confusion. The two of them had been rather far away earlier, so although they had heard Ma Yujia's voice, they had not clearly heard what Ma Yujia had said. Now that Situ Liangji had shouted, it naturally attracted the attention of the two of them. Ma Yujia cast a sidelong glance at Situ Liangji, but he was not afraid at all. Instead, he coldly looked back at Situ Liangji and said, "What? I'm just complaining." "Are you complaining about me? Don't think I don't know." Situ Liangji's gaze was very unfriendly. He looked at Ma Yujia, and his tone was as cold as the winter. Ma Yujia shrugged and said, "What I said is indeed the truth. When you were exploring the formation, you did indeed go in the wrong direction. Among those present, not only did I see it, but this long one beside me should also have seen it." Ma Yujia very immorally betrayed Juoen, and he pointed at Juoen beside him and chuckled. Juoen was speechless. This damn fatty was really as sinister as before. He actually dragged him into the water without saying anything. "It has nothing to do with me. It was this fatty who said it. I didn't say you went in the wrong direction." Juoen hurriedly waved his hand. Situ Liangji glared at Juoen. Obviously, he also hated the latter. "The two of you were originally in the same group. Our team kindly accepted you, but you came to belittle me like this?" Situ Liangji said furiously. Zhongli Haoyan hurriedly came over to smooth things over and said, Brother Situ, they should be unintentional as well. Don't take it to heart too much. Situ Liangji sucked in a deep breath and said to Zhongli Haoyan, Haoyan, I know that you're kind-hearted, similarly of the human race. Accepting them is actually nothing much. But this fatty and this knife-scarred man seriously don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. To actually point fingers at me. Could it be that they are formation path God masters too? Furthermore, even if they are indeed formation path God masters, how high can their standards be? Coming over and pointing at me. Who the hell do they think they are? Situ Liangji jabbered on endlessly, faintly showing signs of not giving up. Zhongli Haoyan was rather embarrassed. Rather, it was Ma Yujie, this fatty, who was not afraid in the slightest, retorting sarcastically, You don't say I'm a formation path God master. I'm much more superior than you, this dabbler. Ma Yujie, this guy's ability to pull aggro was getting stronger and stronger. This sentence thoroughly infuriated Situ Liangji. Situ Liangji suddenly stood up and said to Zhongli Haoyan, Haoyan, today, I'm irreconcilable with these two people. If you don't chase these two people away today, then I'll leave myself. Zhongli Haoyan had a headache. How did things develop to this point? Zhuowen also had a lot of headache, glaring fiercely at Ma Yujie. It was fine if this fatty pulled aggro himself, but he actually even pulled aggro onto him. It was seriously too much of a scam. You can get lost already. How can your bit of formation path standards break this array formation? Ma Yujie boasted shamelessly. Zhongli Haoyan said coldly, Enough, have you said enough? Brother Situ is our only creation level formation path God master here. Your tone is also a little too big, right? Zhongli Haoyan's words were said to Ma Yujie. Clearly, she started to show her might, targeting Ma Yujie, this fellow. After all, this fatty's mouth was seriously too smelly, daring to say anything. Yo, big sister, are you trying to chase me away? Let me tell you, if you chase me away, that's the biggest mistake of your life. This array formation might not be able to break this trash at all. But to me, that's a small problem that's easily solved. After Ma Yujie finished speaking, he even shook his head, feeling good about himself, and winked that pair of small eyes at Zhongli Haoyan. Zhongli Haoyan's face was full of black lines. Forcefully suppressing the anger in her heart, she said coldly, I didn't have the intention of chasing you away, but want you to shut up? Don't tell me you don't have ears. Situ Liangji stood behind Zhongli Haoyan and said with a sneer, Haoyan, this damn fatty actually said that he can easily break this array formation. This is simply a joke. Do you really think that he's a creation level or even higher formation path God master? At least much better than you. This trash. Ma Yujie shrugged and said,